Rain and the winds picking up. Across southern and eastern Scotland, 1 or 2 showers, otherwise largely fine. Northern Ireland, sunny spells to end the day and plenty of fine weather across England and Wales. It's going to stay warm into the evening with light winds as well. Summer finally across many parts of the UK. Into the early hours of Thursday, the rain across Scotland tends to ease. It's a relatively weak front, although a few spits and spots could turn up across the north coast of Northern Ireland, as well as through the central belt. But for the vast majority, it's a dry start to Thursday. Temperatures in some shelter spots in the single figures, light winds, so a fresh start, but quite quickly it will warm up and there'll be plenty of sunshine on offer into the afternoon. Once again, for the vast majority, it's a fine day. However, for the south coast, just the chance that a few showers will turn up later in the afternoon. Where we've got the sunshine, feeling pleasant enough. Temperatures a little higher compared with today, with highs of 22 or 23 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Some good news for Rishi Sunak as inflation drops to the Bank of England target of 2%. The Prime Minister says he can now cut taxes further. But is this too late to save the beleaguered Prime Minister?
Meanwhile, Keir Starmer faces growing allegations that he's planning secret tax hikes. Labour's manifesto states the party won't increase taxes on working people. But how exactly does he define working people? interesting, isn't it, that definition of working people? Keir Starmer seemed to present it as almost, if you're on the verge of destitution, you are a working person, rather than the entirety of Middle England.
And then there was a remarkable rowback by Rachel Reeves this morning, the Shadow Chancellor, who was seemingly saying that, in her view, some pensioners were working people because they'd worked earlier in their lives. I mean, there seems to be a great deal of confusion over what it is to be a working person. I mean, is there anyone in Britain who isn't a working person?
Or has been a working person at one point in their life?
I mean, ultimately, I mean, the strictest interpretation of that is that perhaps only people who've never had jobs will have taxes raised on them. We're just going to see a massive tax raid on people on benefits. I mean, is that the implication?
Well, I mean, that's one interpretation. The problem is it's open to interpretation because they've been so vague. And I think it is time for Labour to come clean on which taxes they would raise if they get into power. It's not good enough to just say we're not going to put up national insurance, we're not going to put up VAT, we're not going to put up income tax. There are so many other taxes, and this rumour of a capital gains tax rise, I mean, it's getting stronger and stronger. It's not going away.
Isn't it interesting that the more that Rachel Reeves denies certain specifics, the more it opens up that idea that actually there are going to be tax rises in other specifics. So, for example, she explicitly ruled out last weekend applying capital gains tax to a family home.
Right,
now, that's a very, very specific issue to rule out. Why did she need to be so specific there? Why could she be so specific there, saying we absolutely won't apply capital gains tax to a family home, but she can't say precisely the same thing, we absolutely won't double capital gains tax elsewhere? She just won't say that, and she's been asked so many times. And again, Keir Starmer yesterday saying we will not apply a football Premier League transfer tax. What a specific thing to rule out.
Yeah,
and
so they can rule things out. But they can rule things out when they want to.
Exactly. So then when they're asked the question of capital gains tax, when they're asked the question of taxes on investment, these taxes that might hit growth, why don't they just say, we're absolutely not going to do that? No, they use that politician words. We have no plans to do that. That's not, we will not do that.
No, it's not. It's rather different. It's a careful framing, isn't it? Anyway, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves have been out in Wiltshire today talking about their party's plans for the economy.
Well, it comes as questions are raised over whether Labour has this hidden tax-rising agenda.
Yes, well, let's cross live to GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, who has been following the Labour campaign today. Olivia, it seems that the Labour camp are in disagreement over what exactly are working people.
Well, absolutely. Keir Starmer was asked that question yesterday on LBC, what exactly is a working person? And his definition seemed to be, that it was a little unclear, people who do not have savings in their bank account, people who haven't yet managed to put anything away. Now, what exactly is the definition of savings? Well, one definition is people who have less than £1,000 in a rainy day fund, which is what think tanks dub people who don't have any savings. Well, that is only 1/3 of people. 2/3 of people do have at least £1,000 in savings accounts, which obviously raises the question for Labour, and that's been asked quite a lot of times today. What happens about those 2/3 of people who are savers, who have a little bit of money in the bank, even if not that much? Will they see their taxes rise? If it's only ruling out rises for working people, and working people are defined as people with less than £1,000 in the bank, then what does that mean for the others? Well, we were talking to Keir Starmer about this today. We're in Wiltshire at the moment at a supermarket. I asked him whether he plans to raise inheritance tax. This is what he had to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can't see that at the moment. Olivia, can you tell us, can you paraphrase how he responded to that? Very interesting.
Absolutely, I will paraphrase. He gave a bit of a politician's answer. He said, as we've heard so many times before, that he is not planning to raise the three main taxes on working people. And by that, he means income tax, national insurance or VAT. He didn't answer the question about inheritance tax. He only said that the plans that Labour have put in their manifesto aren't dependent on more tax rises. So I asked him again, can you rule out, though, a rise in inheritance tax in the next 5 years? He would not answer that question. He was also asked about capital gains taxes, another worry for lots of people who save and invest money. And again, he refused to rule out a rise to capital gains tax. There are lots of worries now that although Labour hasn't actually announced these tax rises in its manifesto, the only way some people believe that they could possibly pay for some of the promises that they've made is by raising some of those taxes. And of course, working people encompass people who pay capital gains tax, encompass people who might pay inheritance tax. So it's an interesting choice of phrase that Keir Starmer keeps using, that we won't be taxing more on working people. Well, what exactly does that mean? I think this morning we're none the wiser than we were yesterday.
And it's interesting because continually through this campaign, it seems that perhaps more pressure is now being applied to the Labour Party to come clean on some of these answers, mainly because no right-thinking person expects anyone other than Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister after the 4th of July. Are you getting any sense that the Labour Party is going to be becoming more clean on these issues? Because we have heard those sort of random specifics, this idea that a transfer tax on the Premier League can be ruled out. What a random specific thing to say. Similarly, capital gains tax on a family home, but not on second homes or on stocks and shares or on all sorts of other things. It seems that it's a bit of a scattergun approach.
It feels as though Keir Starmer is trying to stay as evasive as he can on most of these tax issues. And where we have seen him answer, and as you say, a bit of a scattergun approach on specific taxes, seems to be because he's just been pushed on the question so many times, it gets too awkward for him simply to refuse to answer. I think it's unlikely that over the next 2 weeks, and remember, there are only now 2 weeks left of this election campaign, we will hear more specifics on those issues like council tax, capital gains and inheritance tax. Keir Starmer knows that this election is absolutely his for the losing. His path to number 10 is looking very, very clear indeed. Why would he want to upset the apple cart by giving more specific answers on these taxes? And, you know, the truth is, if you look at the numbers, yes, Labour is talking about growth, which is absolutely a noble ambition, and there are those who argue that the Tories should be talking about growth more. But even if you are concentrating the economy on working towards growth, that's not going to be a quick influx of cash. And lots of the promises that Keir Starmer has made in his manifesto do rely on a quick influx of tax. Growth is something to be sort of considered for perhaps the next Parliament when the economy is getting bigger and stronger. But for now, there will have to be some sort of money coming in quickly. And it's thought that that will probably be in the form of taxes on, well, not working people, apparently. So savers, pensioners, who exactly? I think Keir Starmer will stay as quiet as he can on that question until after the election on July the 4th. And then I think we perhaps can expect to see Labour say, well, sorry, we had no idea the economy was quite as bad as it is. This is when we're going to start raising taxes.
Extremely frustrating. Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Rutley, for being there on the Labour battle bus for us. Olivia, of course, she is our GB News political correspondent.
It might be the first time that we've had a live with Olivia on the battle bus where it didn't break up and the signal has been marvellous throughout.
She was parked, wasn't she?
The stationary battle bus is what we need to be doing more of.
Definitely, but the thing is, the IFS have come out and said, you know, if you want to stick to spending pledges, you're going to have to put taxes up. Yet we need to know where these taxes are going to, you know, fall. People need to plan. People need to plan ahead anyway. Let us know what you think.
Maybe they don't want people to plan, because if people plan ahead, then they move their money and then the money doesn't get taxed.
You might sell something,
They want to spring on surprise tax rises so that they can take the money as soon as they're in, is a theory. Of course, what the Labour Party says is that they have no plans to do any of the above. Well, the inflation has fallen to the Bank of England's target of 2% today. It's the first time it's been at this level in 3 years. That's all following a sustained period of high inflation, which peaked at 11% in October 2022.
Yes, so the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says inflation wouldn't have fallen under Labour. Is he right?
A year and a half ago, we had higher inflation than nearly any other major economy. Today, it is lower, and that shows the difficult decisions we've taken have paid off. That would not have happened under Labour. They refused to condemn the public sector pay strikes. That would have meant higher inflation for longer. Instead, we have lower inflation, taxes starting to come down, and hopefully now mortgages starting to come down. It would be a terrible shame if we turn the clock back and put up taxes for every family with savings, which is what it now emerges Keir Starmer plans to do.
Well, that's what our Chancellor Jeremy Hunt had to say, but our Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says that people are still struggling and the Conservatives are to blame.
People are still really struggling because although inflation is back at target and that is welcome, of course it doesn't mean that any of those price rises have been undone. Price rises have been very severe in the last few years. The cost of the weekly food shop up almost 30% since the last general election. People looking to remortgage this year paying more than £200 a month more on their mortgage because of the Conservatives' mini budget less than 2 years ago that crushed the economy and sent mortgage rates soaring. So the Conservatives might want to say everything's OK, but I know for many people right across our country, they're still struggling.
Well, let's find out more from GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, do you get the impression Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are making the most of this good news?
Yes. Hi, Emily. Hi, Tom. I certainly do. I think when they were planning this general election in secret before they announced it towards the end of April, they clearly had this Wednesday in mind, 2 weeks out from the polling day, as a moment when it could be seen that the plan pushed by Rishi Sunak to control immigration, bring it down to 2%, as he has done, will succeed. The question is, will it have any bearing on polling? We're seeing a big MRP poll drop from YouGov at 5 o'clock. All eyes on that. So far, it seems that the public simply is not listening to what this government's trying to say. But yes, you've heard that we've got some interviews with the PM Rishi Sunak to play out around 12:30 later on today, and also chat with him again with those remarks on GB News later today. He's here in East Anglia, making clear why he thinks that this is the right step and don't risk it all by going to Labour. But no question, they are very pleased with this. But will it make any bearing on the polls? I'm not so sure.
Today, the Prime Minister was in North Devon in a seat with a 25,000 Conservative majority. Today, the Prime Minister's in East Anglia, many of these seats with majorities north of 20,000. This is remarkable for a Prime Minister during a general election campaign. Do you get the sense that the Conservatives think these Tory seats in deep blue East Anglia are at risk?
It's more than the sense, Tom. It is what is clearly happening. I mean, look at where they're campaigning. The reason why Boris Johnson, it appears, is going off on another holiday and is not stepping in to help this party is because they're not fighting the same election as they were fighting in 2019. They're not trying to punch out into red wall seats. If that was the campaign and they're trying to hang on to those red wall seats, you can imagine Boris Johnson would want to come and help out. But that's not the campaign they're fighting. They are defending seats against Lib Dems, seats against Labour, where they should be winning. You're totally right. Yesterday we were in North Devon, Geoffrey Cox's seat, 25,000 majority in the last election, and then we went to one with around 15,000 or so. Today we've been in seats where there's tens of thousands majority for the Tory party. They're in seats here they shouldn't be losing if they weren't fighting such a defensive campaign, and I don't know why they are being so defensive. I've been ruminating today about why they're not taking more risks. We're on a bus here, a battle bus. Why isn't this bus not pulling into towns across the country? We jump down with a GB News camera and we film Rishi Sunak meeting with voters, some of whom are cross and angry and others aren't. Instead, we are seeing a safety-first campaign from the Tory leader. We're doing trips which a Prime Minister would do, not a party leader who's 20 points behind in the polls. I don't know why they haven't yet slipped off the safety catch.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Christopher. Enjoy your time on the battle bus there. GB News political editor.
I have to say, it does seem that Olivia has a rather more fun battle bus than Christopher does at this moment in time. A bit of a funereal mood on the sort of blue Tory battle bus, whereas it did seem the Labour battle bus might be in a bit of more cheery...
But Labour have a lot of questions to answer. They have a lot of questions to answer over this tax stuff. I mean, you've got to be in agreement over what a working person means if you're using that to talk about which taxes you're going to not raise anyway.
But of course.
Yeah.
The big news, inflation 2%. The Prime Minister is saying that means he can go further with tax cuts. Big question is that true? Should we get the views of Albi Amankona, GB News contributor and a bit of a finance boffin? Albi, is the Prime Minister accurate in what he says when he says that lower inflation can lead to lower taxes?
First of all, inflation is back down to 2%. As Margaret Thatcher would say, just rejoice at that news. That is the Bank of England target. That is the target that Rishi Sunak set himself and the Bank of England. And it is undeniably a good thing that inflation is back down at 2%. Now, inflation being back down at 2% does not mean that prices are not still rising. It just means that prices are rising more slowly. Now, on the question about whether or not this allows Rishi Sunak to deliver more tax cuts, that's an interesting question. It was certainly his argument during the 2022 leadership contest that Liz Truss's pledges would not work because cutting taxes would increase inflation, because it would essentially increase the money in the economy. And inflation is also described as too much money chasing too few goods. So you can certainly make the argument that now inflation is back down at normal levels, taxes can be cut further. The question is, does he have the commensurate spending cuts in order to cut taxes in a way which is affordable?
Now, it's clear the Conservatives want this to be a crucial dividing line. We're the party who want to cut your taxes and will continue to do so. The Labour Party are the ones who are planning secret tax hikes. But we haven't actually been told about any tax hikes coming down the line, apart from those that have been in the manifesto, the non-dom loopholes, the VAT on private school fees. Is that a decent attack line when Labour simply are refusing to outline?
It's certainly a difficult attack line when Labour are saying we're not going to raise taxes on working people. The problem is, what is Keir Starmer's definition of a working person? He seemed to make an assertion on LBC with Nick Ferrari that a working person is someone that doesn't have any savings. Well, that is just 1/6 of the British population. So that is not. So if he's only going to not raise taxes on 1/6 of the British population, then that probably doesn't sound very promising. But I think when we talk about inflation, we've got to think about how it actually impacts consumers. What does inflation back at 2% actually mean for you and me and the viewers watching us at home? Well, not very much, until interest rates are actually cut. And it's only when interest rates are actually cut that the banks might then feed that through onto mortgage rates, and we'll actually start to see mortgage rates come down. And that would mean that people would have more money in their pockets, and perhaps landlords wouldn't need to charge as much rent as they're currently charging to cover their mortgages.
Now, Albi, you said rejoice at that news, that this is what the Prime Minister has been looking to achieve. But really, did the Prime Minister do anything at all here? Was this not entirely the independent Bank of England's decision to raise interest rates that has brought inflation down? The Bank of England's been independent since 1997. What's the Prime Minister got to do with that?
Yeah, it's certainly the Bank of England's, one of the Bank of England's jobs to manage inflation, and the way that the Bank of England did that was by rising interest rates. That's quite often what central banks do. Now, what Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, would say is that by not cutting taxes earlier when he wanted to cut taxes after Liz Truss was the Prime Minister, he actually did not stimulate inflation even further. But the problem is, if you are going to claim credit for inflation coming down, are you going to claim credit for inflation coming up? And we certainly haven't heard from any politicians an admission that actually the policies implemented during lockdown, the quantitative easing that we have seen, the response to the Russia-Ukraine war and the inflation crisis that has followed was actually the cause of the inflation that we're seeing. So if they're going to accept responsibility for inflation coming down, they've got to at least accept some responsibility for causing inflation to go up in the first place.
Yes, a very good point. Thank you very much for your time, Albi Amankona, GB News contributor and financial expert.
Well, next up, the SNP have promised a huge boost to the NHS. I can't speak today. The SNP have promised a huge boost to the NHS, but can they deliver it? Also, George Galloway will be launching his manifesto.
Yes, it's a bit late.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Worcester firstly, the northbound A449 is shut between Blackpool Road and the Red House Inn roundabout. There's a collision there causing big delays. To Bath in Somerset, the lower Bristol Road, that's the A36 from Broomhays down towards Windsor Bridge Road is currently closed off and queuing. That's due to a collision. Now there's one being investigated for the Chelsea Bridge in Battersea in London, so that's currently shut in both directions, queuing back to Grosvenor Road and to and from Vauxhall Bridge, busy over Battersea Bridge as well. M25 clockwise before South Mims 23, queuing almost back to 21A at St Albans following an earlier overturned car. All lanes open though. At Shermanbury in West Sussex, the A281, parts blocked by Partridge Green Road and queuing for a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Helen Worth, who of course plays Gail Platt in Coronation Street, is going to leave the soap after an epic 50 years. I'm joined now by another Corrie legend, Charlie Lawson, whose character, of course, Jim McDonald, lived across the cobbles from Gail Platt for many years. Welcome to the show, Charlie. I can see you looking at those images there, and it has to be said, fantastic acting. In 50 years, many of us just grew up with these characters and basically think they're part of our family. Can you shed light on some of your happy memories of the talent of Helen Worth?
We saw each other every day. She was a consummate professional and still is. This initially surprised me, but then I thought about it, and I'm frankly not surprised. Having spoken to certain senior members of the cast over the last period of time, you know, when Helen joined, or even when I joined, there was a cast of 25. I would put another 75 on that now, perhaps. It's a different animal now, totally, you know, 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. When Helen started, it would have been 2. She lives in London. She's not getting any younger. And she's done 50 years, for God's sake. Nobody can ask any more of that. And listen, Helen, look at that wee smile. God bless you, darling. I hope you have a great retirement. The trouble with actors is that we very, very rarely hang our boots up unless the bank balance is full, which it very seldom is. But also, we live for attention. And when you're in the most famous program on the planet, that attention 9 times out of 10 is an extremely good experience.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Straight now to George Galloway's manifesto launch.
On factotums with no connection to the community as their candidate. I'd put money, in fact, he's probably our candidate there, is probably the hottest tip I can give you. Before turning to the manifesto itself, and I must say we're very proud of it, a very beautiful document, a meaningful document, as opposed to Labour's manifesto, which seems to consist only of pictures of Keir Starmer and blank spaces. I want to make some preliminary remarks. There's a very real danger of Nigel Farage running away with this election because of the deliberate vacuity. I'm not accusing either Sunak or Starmer of being stupid, the deliberate and contrived vacuity, emptiness of their leadership and their programs. People, I mean, it's not for nothing that my phrase that they, Labour and Tory, are 2 cheeks of the same backside has become the most famous thing I've ever said in all my life. It resounds everywhere that you say it, and you even hear other people saying it, sometimes with attribution, sometimes not. It's no accident that that is a phrase that has risen and resounds, because it is so palpably, self-evidently true that there is no difference between the policies of Labour and the Conservatives on all meaningful things, which is why, under Freud's narcissism of the small difference, they have to raise their voices about the small differences that exist between them, because no meaningful difference exists between them. And it doesn't help that both are subprime performers in the public arena. I was born when Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Britain. I'm that old. And I have known well, in some cases, Prime Ministers from Harold Wilson, whom I knew well, Callaghan, whom I knew well, Thatcher not so well, but saw her at close quarters, fought her every step of the way. Major I knew well, Blair I knew well, Brown I knew well, and so on. I have never seen an election in which two people who less deserve to be the Prime Minister of Britain are competing for that office. And that's reflected in the polls. In the latest polling, the number of people, percentage of people who will be voting Labour or Conservative is going to be the lowest since the Second World War. And those that are voting for one or other of Labour and Conservative are largely doing so because one is not the other.
George Galloway there talking about how percentage terms, few people voting for Conservatives and Labour, the lowest since the Second World War. Must say we're going to have a one-to-one interview with George Galloway a little bit later in the programme.
Yes, the catchphrase, two cheeks of the same backside, coming up several times. Anyway, in other news, Scotland's First Minister demands another independence vote if they win a majority of seats in Scotland.
We will always put the interests of people in Scotland first, wherever our people were born, wherever our people have come from. And at the very heart of our beliefs is the principle that decisions about Scotland should be made by the people who live in Scotland. Why? For the simple reason that no one else cares as much about this wonderful country, and no one else will do a better job of taking care of it now and in the future than the people who live here. It is through independence, therefore, that we believe we can build a fairer country and a more prosperous economy we know is possible. Not independence for its own sake, independence for the powers to protect our National Health Service and to help people through tough times. Independence for a stronger economy and happier, healthier lives. And independence for a better future for Scotland, made in Scotland, for Scotland.
The inspiring words of the First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney there. What an orator. Well, he went on to say that an independent Scotland would allow the SNP to invest in the NHS and help people through tough times. Although, of course, they do currently have tax-raising powers and can invest in the NHS if they choose to do so inside the United Kingdom. But speaking to us now is the political editor of the Scottish Daily Mail, Michael Blackley. What did you make of John Swinney's speech, but also, perhaps, his speaking style?
Well, I think what you heard there, it was only a short part of that speech that you showed, but how many times did we hear the word independence? I think that was at the centre of everything that he said today. It was the first page of the SNP's manifesto was all about independence. And what I think we're seeing with that is that the SNP are just desperate to get people who support independence to vote for them. If they can get people to coalesce around them, it will prevent a disastrous result for them. And I think in reality, that is all that the SNP are trying to do at this election. They're trying to prevent a disastrous turnaround in their fortunes. They're trying to prevent losing dozens of seats. And that's really what this is all about. In terms of the delivering style of John Swinney, I mean, he doesn't have the charisma of Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon, does he? So these kind of events, it's a very different sort of SNP leader, and I don't think he's really going to have the personal appeal amongst even pro-independence voters that some of his predecessors did.
And Michael, where is independence in terms of what Scottish people care most about when they go to the ballot? Do we have that information?
Well, I think what you've seen from recent polls on the independence question, it's very similar to the referendum 10 years ago. There's maybe about 45% of people supporting independence on the whole. However, there's quite a lot of those voters who don't think this is the time to have a referendum. And really, for a lot of voters, even those in favour of independence, it feels like a referendum is a long way away, especially with the SNP facing the kind of crisis that they're in at the moment. So a lot of viewers will be tuning in and hearing John Swinney's manifesto launch and really being a bit surprised that it's all about independence rather than being about some of the key issues that they might want the SNP and others to be focusing on.
To some extent, it's sort of a core vote strategy that is being pursued here, and yet, is it perhaps the correct strategy for the party to be pursuing? After all, many people will be voting not so much on particulars of policy lines, but on that core issue of the union. Pro-SNP people trying to keep out unionists, and unionists holding their noses and voting for either the Tories, the Lib Dems or the Labour Party, whoever's best placed to beat the SNP.
Yes, absolutely. And every general election, every election that I can think of, there is always a point at which the SNP try to appeal to people who don't support independence. So in a general election contest, they often argue that voting the SNP is a vote for a party that stands up for Scotland's interests. So they try to appeal to these even pro-union voters. And it just seems like that is going to be very difficult for them to do in this election when so much of the manifesto is about independence. But as I say, there's 45% that maybe might vote for independence. And I think it is a core vote strategy. It's all about targeting that 45%. And if the SNP can win as many as possible of those voters, then they might avoid some of the defeats that they'll otherwise face.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Michael Blackley, political editor of the Scottish Daily Mail, of course. I'd say, other than the independence question, it does read like a standard left-wing manifesto. You've got tackling the cost of living, you've got ending 14 years of austerity, you've got demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, of course, you've got scrapping the two-child benefit cap, and standing up for the WASPy women.
Well, there we go. Now, in a few moments, we're going to be looking at a new report which claims that British children are getting shorter, fatter and sicker. But is it true? We might well have to do a bit of fact-checking. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30. The top story from the newsroom, and we've heard in the last hour that the jury in the trial of aristocrat Constance Martin and Mark Gordon has been discharged, unable to reach a verdict on charges over the death of their newborn daughter. The 37-year-old and 50-year-old man were on trial at the Old Bailey for manslaughter and other charges after their daughter Victoria was found dead in a supermarket bag in Brighton. The couple were arrested following a high-profile police search. After over 72 hours of deliberation, jurors were unable to agree on a verdict. Martin and Gordon may face a retrial. The Scottish National Party has launched its election manifesto, describing it as the most left-wing offering from any party. Speaking at an event in Edinburgh earlier, Scotland's First Minister John Swinney put an independence at the core of the 33-page document, saying his party will also push the next government in Westminster to boost healthcare funding by £1.6 billion a year. As we've heard today, inflation has now eased to 2%, increasing the prospect of an interest rate cut within months. It's the first time in nearly 3 years that the figure's been at the Bank of England's target. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says it's because of the Conservatives' plans for the economy, but Labour says the government has nothing to do with the figure. The UK has seen its highest day for migrant arrivals so far this year. The Home Office says nearly 900 people made their way by small boat across the Channel yesterday. A total of 15 boats were intercepted as they made the journey from France. Spanish police are searching for a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife. Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old called a friend to say that he was lost whilst hiking. He had no water and that his phone was on just 1% battery. And in North Korea, leader Kim Jong-un has promised full support for Russia's war in Ukraine as he met Vladimir Putin in Pyongyang. The two heads of state have finished one-on-one talks that lasted around 2 hours, and they've signed an agreement including a vow of mutual aid if either country is attacked. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past 12. Now, for the first time in 40 years, industrial action is being taken by steelwork staff at Tata Steel, starting with an overtime ban.
Well, this comes as the company plan changes that will see 2,800 job losses. Our national reporter Theo Chakomba has sent this report from South Wales.
Since the 1960s, when you think of Port Talbot, you think of steel. But that could be coming to an end as the owner's Indian company Tata plan to close 2 furnaces that will see thousands lose their jobs. Jason, an electrical engineer, has worked here for 25 years.
Since leaving school, I've been in the steel industry. So I've built my family around the steel industry. I've been part of the very loyal, committed workforce. So yeah, basically everything I've got is all part of what I've achieved through the steel industry. Said we're fighting for that future, we're fighting for that existence, for that to carry on.
Tata Steel say the reason for the closure is that they have been losing over £1 million a day. Meanwhile, the government say without their support package, many thousands more would have lost their jobs here in Port Talbot and the wider supply chain. And that's why thousands of steelworkers like Ian say they won't give up without putting up a fight, especially with the general election around the corner.
Yeah, because up until, Rishi Sunak announced the general election, we were looking at 500 million from the government, and what do we do? But that hasn't been signed, so the new Labour government hopefully coming in, they've been quite forceful in saying they will not support 500 million for 2,800 job losses. They want a better transition that saves jobs and grows the industry. So I think we're at a pivotal point of what we can do here.
The steel industry contributes £2.4 billion into the UK economy every year. One of a number of reasons why United Unions say the deal they've been offered is disastrous for their members.
There are workers here who've been here for decades. We've got all of that experience here, and to lose this site and to lose that work is an absolute disaster for Britain. And I think during the general election, this is absolutely a key issue. Supporting British industry, ensuring that we're competitive, that we're productive, that there are good, well-paid jobs for British people is really important.
While the future is uncertain for thousands who have kept the fires burning in Port Talbot, Tata Steel's ambitions for a greener future come at a cost for those who call this place home. Theo Chakomba, GB News.
Such a tough story for those workers, but ultimately, this is always going to be a political issue for as long as energy is twice as expensive in the UK as it is in the United States. The fact is that these plants just aren't profitable with energy costs this high.
Yeah, it's so expensive, the production with sky-high energy costs. Anyway, this is an interesting one. Are children in the UK actually getting shorter, fatter and sicker? The Food Foundation is warning the height of 5-year-olds is falling because of poor diet and increased poverty. They blame aggressive marketing of cheap, ultra-processed food for a significant decline in children's health, even their height.
Well, joining us now is the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute for Economic Affairs, Chris Snowdon. Chris, This is a phrase I think we've heard a number of times in recent years, that children are getting fatter and shorter particularly. What's this data based on?
It's a sort of meme that arose a year or two ago, and it's just not true. I mean, there's not much more you can say about it other than it's not true. There's only one measure of a child's height in Britain. It's a very good one because every child gets measured. That's a national child measurement program, and they measure 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds every year, or reception kids in year 6 if you prefer. And no, they are not getting shorter. The specific claim in the Food Foundation report is that children have shrunk since 2013 at the age of 4 or 5. In actual fact, the data shows that they've increased their height by 1 centimetre.
Chris, hang on. How are they getting away? If what you're saying is true, how are they getting away with publishing stuff that is so much not true? There must be a grain of truth here, otherwise it wouldn't be published in The Guardian and all the other papers that picked it up today.
There's some sort of web page from something called the Non-Communicable Disease Coalition or something like that, and they put this myth into circulation about 18 months ago. The Telegraph covered it and everyone started sharing a graph. Their data is just wrong. I mean, there's no way they have separate data for the height of children in this country. As far as I can see, they just made a mistake.
What about the fat issue? Children are surely getting fatter. I mean, we can see it with our own eyes.
Yeah, I mean, childhood obesity, or what the government defines as childhood obesity, which actually includes a lot of people who are not fat, but that's a different story. That has grown over time, but nearly all the increase in the last 15 years came during COVID. And among reception-age kids, it's more or less gone back to where it was before. Amongst the year 6 kids, it's still significantly higher than it was before COVID, but it was very, very obvious in 2020, 2021. It just rocketed up. Now, the reasons for that we can discuss. I would say physical activity probably has a lot to do with it, and locking kids down didn't help things, but you can also maybe blame diet as well. Anyhow, the main point is that actually for the last 15, 20 years, there's been a very small increase in child obesity, except for during the pandemic.
So that's quite interesting. So young children haven't bounced back from the pandemic in terms of they put on that weight because they were at home and probably eating too much and not exercising, and they've struggled to get it back off.
Yeah, that's right. And the funny thing is it hasn't affected adults. Adult obesity didn't go up during the pandemic. Really? There's a lot more heavy drinking, but no more heavy eating by the looks of it.
I suppose that stands to reason, because young children, they'll get most of their exercise when they're just running around playing football with each other, and sort of just social activities for children are much more hyperactive, whereas social activities for adults are probably quite a bit more sedentary and don't really involve so much of anything. When I'm exercising, it's more of a solitary thing rather than
he's in the gym pumping the iron.
Oh, when I try to. But Chris, this is fascinating, because this gets to not just the discussion that we have in the media, this gets to the policy pipeline, because we've seen a lot of government initiatives in the last few years that have tried to stop certain things being advertised, move around the internal layout of supermarkets.
Newcastle City Council today.
And Newcastle City Council today have announced that they're going to ban fast food shops. I mean, it doesn't really feel like we're living in a free market economy at all when it comes to food.
We're not living in a free market economy, full stop. And the general anti-growth, anti-business attitude is well summed up by people in public health, people in Newcastle who are saying we're not going to open up any more new takeaways, as if it's going to make any difference to anything. It's another example of a policy that goes not just it's not just not evidence-based. It actually goes contrary to the evidence. There's loads and loads of studies looking at the effect of fast food shops on obesity, and basically there isn't an effect, but they do it. I think politicians do these things to show off to one another as much as anything. It's it's got Newcastle City Council in the national news. But yeah, look, I'm not saying there isn't a problem with child obesity or anything, but the advocates of these kind of policies do feel the need to push the envelope, let's say, in what is truthful, in order to get more publicity for their cause.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you so much, Christopher. Really appreciate you speaking to us about this. Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. I mean, banning new junk food shops, fast food shops on the high street, I mean, the only positive I can see is that it might look a bit nicer. I mean, some of these shops, you know, how many chicken cottages or variations on the theme do you need on one high street? I mean, quite unsightly more than anything.
But if you have multiple chicken shops next to each other, they'll keep the prices low, because if one of them puts up the price, then you can go next door. Surely that's a good thing.
Doesn't look great, does it?
Maybe we need design codes. For
design codes, yes, design codes.
You can have whatever shop you want, as long as you have a nice stone sort of frontage, and you can have whatever you want written for your shop sign, but it must be carved into the stone in a sort of serif font.
Yeah, it has to be in the same font, yes. Yeah. Anyway, remember, coming up tonight...
This is our utopia.
Yeah, this is our utopia. Everything looks beautiful. Anyway, the State of the Nation is live with Michael Portillo tonight at 8 o'clock. You do not want to miss it.
And, of course, it's back with me on Thursday as well. But Michael doing Tuesdays and Wednesdays this week and...
Yes, I watched last night. It was very good, so you'll want to tune in again this evening.
Absolutely. Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reacted to the latest inflation figures today. He's been speaking in the last few minutes. This is what he said.
This is a very positive step, shows that the plan we put in place is working. Inflation back to target. It was 11% when I became Prime Minister. I said it was a priority to bring it down so that people can start now to feel an ease in the cost pressures that they've seen. And it's because that plan has worked that we've been able to start cutting people's taxes. And this election is about the future. We want to build on this economic foundation that we now have. And I want to keep cutting people's taxes at every stage in their life. And in contrast, Labour would reverse the progress that we've made and just whack taxes up for everyone, and I don't want to see that happen.
Food, energy, rent still 20% higher than they were 3 years ago. Mortgage repayments have doubled. You can understand why people might say we're just not feeling it.
I know people are only just starting to feel the benefits now of inflation having eased and back to target today, and that's why it's important that we continue to cut people's taxes. I want people to have financial security. I want their hard work to be rewarded so they can keep more of their own money, spend it on the things that they want to, and that's what they'll get with a future Conservative government. Tax cuts at every stage of their life. Tax cuts for people in work as we halve national insurance. Tax cuts for small business owners, entrepreneurs as we abolish self-employed NICs. Tax cuts for a young couple trying to buy their first home as we abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers. And, of course, the Triple Lock Plus to give pensioners a tax cut and protect their pension. Every single one of those is opposed by the Labour Party, and worse than that, we just saw yesterday they yet again couldn't rule out revaluing everyone's council tax bands, whacking up council tax, attacking farmers, you name it, they are going to tax it, and that is the choice at this election.
On small boats, though, no progress at all. In fact, on the other hand, yesterday there were the highest number of crossings so far this year. 882 people attempted the crossing. Why should anyone believe you're capable of sorting it out?
Well, in the last 12 months, the numbers of people crossing the channel is actually down by almost a third. That hasn't happened before, and it shows that we can make a difference. That's what I've been focused on doing. But look, there's a choice at this election.
That highest number yesterday.
There's a choice. There's always going to be days which are worse than others. But the choice of this election is about how do we solve this problem for good. I've got a plan to do that, and that's about getting an incentive up and running, or deterrent up and running, removing the incentive for people to come here. It's as simple as that. If people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to remove them somewhere else. And if we can get that up and running, then people will stop coming. And multiple other European countries agree with us. That's a choice for people at this election. If you want that deterrent, then you need the flights to go to Rwanda. That's what I'll deliver. In contrast, Keir Starmer's going to let everyone out of the detention centres, offer an amnesty, make us a soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration, and I don't think that's right.
And why did you call the election then before showing that that would work?
Well, this election is about our future, and elections have choices, and there's a choice for people. I believe our plan is the right one, and now that we've delivered economic stability back, inflation back to target, it's right that we decide as a country what type of future we want. And my simple message to everyone is, you vote for us, you're going to get tax cuts to deliver your financial security, you're going to get your borders secure as we continue to bring down immigration and have a clear plan to stop the boats, and we're going to make sure that we protect your pension and get to net zero in a sensible way. Like, there's a very clear offer for everyone. There's a clear choice. That's what elections are about. And there's a consequence of not voting for us. All the illegal migrants that we've been detained will be let out onto our streets by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. Those flights will be cancelled. There will be no deterrent. And now multiple other European countries have all agreed that our approach is the right one. They all recognise that unless you're able to return people to a safe alternative, they will just keep on coming. So I've got a clear answer to that problem, a clear plan that if I'm elected, I will deliver, and that's a choice for everyone in a couple of weeks' time.
I'd like to ask you quickly on the SNP. They've launched their manifesto today. They're offering a big cash boost to the NHS. Are they more in touch with voters who would prefer better public services than tax cuts?
Well, under the Conservatives right now, we're investing record sums into the NHS, and that will continue if we're re-elected, with NHS spending and investment going up in real terms ahead of inflation every year of the next Parliament. We're also hiring more doctors and nurses and training more for the future, and doing things differently by making sure people can see their pharmacist instead of their GP to get treatments for common ailments. But look, all the SNP do is focus on constitutional wrangling. They're the ones that aren't focused on what people care about day to day. They've already made Scotland the highest tax capital of the UK, and if Labour are elected, they would just do the same. Hike up everyone's taxes, just like the SNP have done. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate at this election is just a vote for higher taxes. I don't want to see that happen. That's not how you deliver financial security anywhere.
President Putin has been meeting the North Korean leader, signing a new strategic partnership pact. How worried are you by that?
I've spoken previously about an axis of authoritarian states, Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, who are increasingly acting together, as you are seeing today, in a way that threatens our interests, our values, and indeed our security. That's why I made the bold decision to increase investment in our defence to 2.5% of GDP. It's a clear plan, it's a bold plan. Keir Starmer hasn't matched that plan. If he's elected as Prime Minister in the most uncertain and dangerous times that this country has known in decades, one of the first things he will do is cut the planned increases in defence spending. That's not the right thing for our country. I'm deeply concerned that at a time of such challenge and worry, as you're seeing today with Putin meeting the North Koreans, that Keir Starmer doesn't think the right thing to do is to increase investment in our defence. I do. That's how we keep everyone safe. It's the first government priority to do that, and that's what you'll get from me as Prime Minister.
Rishi Sunak there, speaking from inside the TARDIS, by the looks. He's been in East Anglia today.
Mark's got in touch. He says, has Rishi got a spaceship? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Does look a bit like that. Certainly a control room.
Yes, yes, but of course, the most peculiar thing about Rishi Sunak's itinerary over the last few weeks, or few days I should say, is how he's stopped going to seats that would be considered marginal and has started going to seats with majorities of 10, 20, 25,000 votes. It seems like there's been a huge switch in the Conservative campaign strategy. They're not looking at sort of holding on to these seats that they won by a couple of thousand votes. They're now campaigning hard in seats that they won by tens of thousands of votes.
But this isn't much energy, is there? It all seems a little bit dreary, a little bit low energy, a little bit lacklustre. I mean, we saw Nigel Farage with his fireworks going off with a hall filled with 800-odd people in it. You know, you've got to give things a bit of welly, surely, no?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Otherwise you get the accusation you've given up.
But clearly he's trying to present a sort of image of being this sensible, stable guy that got inflation down to 2%. Would standing next to big fizzing fireworks like Nigel Farage really sort of fall into that brand?
Well, no, perhaps I wouldn't suggest that for Rishi Sunak. I'm not a political communications strategist, but a little bit more energy wouldn't go amiss, you know? You want to be the Prime Minister of this great country.
Yeah, perhaps he needs to stop doing these stage-managed events and do what John Major did in 1992. Get his soapbox out, go into the country, talk to real people rather than just a few Conservative activists.
There's always the risk of hecklers, though, these days, aren't there?
Good. I want Prime Ministers who can take hecklers on. Someone comes up to them and shouts at them, they should have an answer. They should actually be able to engage with that.
They should be able to.
Real politics.
They should be able to, yes, certainly. It's all a bit sort of wrapped in cotton wool.
It's far too wrapped in cotton wool. And do you know what? I can't imagine Sunak or Starmer doing that. I could imagine David Cameron doing that, though. I could imagine Boris Johnson doing that. I'd probably imagine Nigel Farage doing that.
Well, in just a few seconds, we're going to be speaking to former Labour MP Gloria DePiero to see what her take is on Labour's campaign so far and that big question mark over tax.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. High pressure today. That means most places are going to be fine. There'll be some warm sunny spells as well. Not entirely blue skies. There are a couple of things going on. First of all, some patchy cloud lingering across the UK under this ridge of high pressure as it builds in. And secondly, a weak frontal system will bring thickening cloud and some spots of rain into the far north of Scotland through the day. Freshening breeze here, but otherwise plenty of sunshine, and the early cloud tends to disappear through the afternoon. So we're going to see some sunshine breaking out, where we get the sunshine feeling pleasant enough. 22 to 23 Celsius in the south, 21 Celsius further north. Although for northern and northwest Scotland, we do see further thickening of the cloud, especially for Lewis and Harris, with some outbreaks of rain moving in by the evening. But for much of the rest of Scotland, sunny skies remain as we end the day, and increasingly sunny skies for Northern Ireland, Northern England as well as for Wales, the Midlands. Plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures at 6 p.m. still at 20 or 22 Celsius. Now, by the later half of the evening, the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, along with a freshening breeze, push into western Scotland, eventually sinking into the central belt but tending to fizzle out. Meanwhile, across the rest of the UK, it's staying dry overnight with clear spells, but temperatures will dip in sheltered rural spots down to 4 or 5 Celsius across parts of England and Wales. So a fresh start to Thursday, but a bright start nevertheless. Plenty of sunshine first thing for England and Wales. There's always the threat of some showers making an appearance later across the far southeast, but for the vast majority it's going to stay dry. Long spells of sunshine, just some patchy cloud around, and highs of 23 or even 24 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The University of Cambridge has told students to stop flirting with staff under a new policy banning sexual relationships with professors. The new rules, which come into force next month, beginning of July, include a warning against behaviour that could be interpreted as flirtatious. University staff have been told they must report any behaviour that could constitute a student making advances towards a personal, particularly intimate relationship with them. If you're a tutor, how do you interpret what is flirting and what is just sort of like having a bit of banter?
In fact, we've got to
very nice trousers, by the way.
Thank you.
You see, you didn't even recognise.
Oh, I didn't know. I think I'm blushing now. I'm blushing.
So, what's flirting? What's me complimenting your very well-fitting trousers? Yeah.
Well, there is a line, because obviously when you're 18 and you go to university, it might be the first time you're away from home. It might be the first time that you're open to maybe a bit of a nightlife, social activity, drinking and all the rest of it. On the flip side, I know a couple who, the pupil ended up dating their professor, and they've been together for about sort of 15 years now. So I used to go after lectures with my professor and the whole seminar. We used to go to the pub afterwards, and I became very good friends with, she was a mature student. She was on the very, very far left of political. You wondered where that was going for a second, didn't you?
We're both breathing a huge sigh of relief.
Very quick for you, Joe. We're running out of very nice trousers as well. We're running
Thank you, not as snug as Charlie. I think you've got to have some rules in place that there's no abuse of power. Policing it's difficult. we ought to be in a position where you can say, get off, back off, or, you know, banter's fine. Actually, I hate that word. I hate it almost as much as woke. Go on, email in.
Thank you very much. I'm flirting with both.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of June. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
So good news for Rishi Sunak. Inflation drops to the Bank of England target of 2%. The Prime Minister says he can now cut taxes further. But is it all a little bit too late to save the Prime Minister?
Or is it a lifeboat? Meanwhile, Keir Starmer faces growing allegations that he's planning secret tax hikes. Labour's manifesto states the party won't increase taxes on working people. But how exactly are working people being defined here? Gloria De Piero, the former Labour MP, is with us for more on this.
And there's growing concern for a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife. The 19-year-old Jay Slater was last seen 2 days ago after attending a music event. We'll get an update live from the island. And we've got some pictures to bring you. Breaking news that Just Stop Oil, the activist group, have decided to, well, attack Stonehenge. There you go, with their classic orange spray. They're saying on Twitter that 2 people have taken action the day before the summer solstice. They're demanding the incoming government sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels. They're asking people to help them take megalithic action. So there you go. Tom, thoughts?
Just extraordinary. These stones, in some cases, have stood for 5,000 years. These stones have stood in that place for 5,000 years. And in that time, these stones have stood unfettered. They have not been graffitied. They have not been sprayed with fire extinguishers full of orange paint. And yet, who do these people think they are?
Well, you know what, Tom?
Who do they think they are?
Who do they think they are? Well, apparently they think they're decorators. Their press release that they've put out say that they're decorating Stonehenge. That doesn't look like any decoration to me, or to you, I suppose. I mean, what should we do with these groups? Because they seem to just be continuing to break the law. Is it time for a tougher clampdown?
And they're proud of breaking the law as well. I mean, they're not sort of invisible people. I mean, there are repeated offenders within these groups. They have premises, these groups. Some of these groups even have registered companies attached to them. Well, if they exist to break the law, to damage property, in some cases to smash windows and all the rest of it, well, if that's their stated aim as a group, why on earth are they allowed to operate legally in this country?
Well, Tom, so one of the students, of course, involved in all of this, a student from Oxford, has said standing inert for generations works well for stones, not climate policy.
Do you know what?
Make sense of that.
Well, I think...
It's rather disrespectful, at the very least.
Do you know what? I think I'm going to go and take a bunch of paint and or maybe some cannon and just blow up the pyramids because I want tax cuts. Is that how this works?
Well, apparently they think, oh, well, it's going to be gone with the rain, so no issue here. Well, send your views in, post your comments, visiting gbnews.com/your say. But let's get the headlines.
Tom, Emily, thanks very much. Good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock. The top story this afternoon, in fact, for the first time in nearly 3 years, inflation has fallen to the Bank of England's 2% target. It's boosted hopes of an interest rate cut in the coming months. Most analysts were forecasting that drop, which is down from 2.3% in April, lower than Germany, France and the US. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says it's great news, but claims that inflation could rise again if Labour wins the general election.
A year and a half ago, we had higher inflation than nearly any other major economy. Today, it is lower, and that shows the difficult decisions we've taken have paid off. That would not have happened under Labour. They refused to condemn the public sector pay strikes. That would have meant higher inflation for longer. Instead, we have lower inflation, taxes starting to come down, and hopefully now mortgages starting to come down. It would be a terrible shame if we turn the clock back and put up taxes for every family with savings, which is what it now emerges Keir Starmer plans to do.
Chancellor Jeremy Hunt there. Well, Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is warning the cost of living crisis isn't over and says that prices are still going up.
Price rises have been very severe in the last few years. The cost of the weekly food shop up almost 30% since the last general election. People looking to remortgage this year paying more than £200 a month more on their mortgage because of the Conservatives' mini budget less than 2 years ago that crushed the economy and sent mortgage rates soaring. So the Conservatives might want to say everything's OK, but I know for many people right across our country, they're still struggling.
Well, as we heard just a few moments ago from Tom and Emily, that breaking news coming to us that Just Stop Oil protesters have targeted Stonehenge, spraying the monument with an orange substance. Video posted to social media, which you can see here if you're watching on television, shows two people running towards the monoliths with canisters spraying orange paint. Members of the public also then seen trying to prevent the protesters from doing so. Several stones covered in that substance before one protester stopped and sat on the grass. We'll bring you more on that situation as we get it throughout the rest of this afternoon. More than 800 migrants arrived in the UK yesterday after making the dangerous journey in small boats across the Channel. That's the highest number for a single day so far this year. 15 boats were intercepted as they made the journey from France. The Home Office says it takes the number of arrivals in 2024 to now 12,313. Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has admitted that some days will be worse than others, but defended the government's record.
The choice of this election is about how do we solve this problem for good. I've got a plan to do that, and that's about getting an incentive up and running, or deterrent up and running, removing the incentive for people to come here. It's as simple as that. If people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to remove them somewhere else. And if we can get that up and running, then people will stop coming. And multiple other European countries agree with us. That's a choice for people at this election. If you want that deterrent, then you need the flights to go to Rwanda.
And in the election, time is running out for voters in England, Scotland and in Wales to apply to vote by post, with the deadline set for 5 o'clock this afternoon. Applications can be made online at gov.uk. Postal voting has surged in popularity, rising from 12.7% in 2005 to now 21%. Meanwhile, more than 600,000 applications to register to vote were submitted yesterday ahead of the national deadline, over half of which were from those aged 34 and under. The jury in the trial of aristocrat Constance Martin and Mark Gordon has been discharged. They're unable to reach a verdict on charges over the death of their newborn daughter. The 37-year-old and 50-year-old were on trial at the Old Bailey for manslaughter and other charges. That's after their daughter Victoria was found dead in Brighton in a supermarket bag. The couple were arrested following a high-profile police search. After 72 hours of deliberation, jurors were unable to agree on a verdict. Martin and Gordon may now face a retrial. Spanish police are continuing their search for a British teenager who has gone missing while on holiday in Tenerife. Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old has called a friend to say he was lost with no water and that his phone was on just 1% battery. His last location showed that he was in a mountainous region of the island that's popular with hikers. And Vladimir Putin is visiting North Korea for the first time in 24 years. Kim Jong-un gave the Russian president a red carpet welcome in Pyongyang earlier. They've announced a comprehensive strategic partnership which would see the countries help each other repel external aggression. The pair were seen laughing together before the North Korean leader pledged his full support for all of Russia's policies. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has also commented on their visit. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain here on GB News.
Well, yes, the big news today that inflation has fallen now to the Bank of England's target of 2%. It's the first time it's been at that level in 3 whole years, now following a sustained period of high inflation, which peaked at 11% back in October 2022.
Well, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says inflation wouldn't have fallen under Labour. But is that a bit of a stretch of the truth? Let's cross live to GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who's been following the Conservatives today. Christopher, let's hope your signal holds. What's been going on?
That's right. Hi, Tom. Hi, Emily. Yeah, we've been in Sizewell B, a nuclear reactor. Prime Minister, he's been very keen, of course, to talk up the 2% inflation target. He's finally got.
You know what? I tempted fate.
Also asked in interviews here about.
Yeah, I tempted fate there. I tempted fate. I said
everything went wrong there, didn't it?
I said I'd hoped the signal would hold, and obviously rural Suffolk is not the best place for signal. I don't know if that's...
You know, Christopher Hope's there, ready and waiting, you know, all guns blazing, ready to go, and then the signal. Signal. It's not our fault, though, I should say. It's just the way our country is.
And
you know,
not to
dips
worry.
in the road, dips in the road.
Not to worry, because we're joined by the former Labour MP, Gloria De Piero, now. And Gloria, the Prime Minister today has been saying that inflation wouldn't have fallen, perhaps not as quickly, under the Labour Party. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, how do you prove an assertion like that, or frankly disprove an assertion like that? The Labour Party has not won an election since 2005. What I would say is, even after the financial crisis, if we're going back as far as that, the economy was growing when Labour left office. It actually went back into recession when David Cameron and George Osborne took the reins. But this is such ancient history. This is how long it is since Labour has won an election.
Well, I mean, you could say that Labour were all for another lockdown towards the end of the pandemic, and that might have, you know, kept inflation up higher for longer.
They supported the governing party, Boris Johnson, in extending lockdowns. They didn't call for them to be. It's a myth that they said.
They said that perhaps there should be a second delay to what was known as Freedom Day. But I think that might be marginal. Perhaps what is the crucial thing here is the question of, would the Labour Party have been more generous with public pay settlements? Because, of course, the Conservative Party has taken a huge amount of flack through not doing that extra spending, and economists would argue that keeping spending lower keeps inflation low.
God, there are so many hypotheticals in this. I'll tell you a fact, Tom, that this is the first Parliament ever where people's living standards are lower at the end of this Parliament than they were at the beginning of this Parliament. That has never happened in history. We have a 70-year tax burden, a 70-year high on the amount of tax
which the Labour Party
wants
to raise.
That's absolute nonsense.
The manifesto says it will be raised.
An absolute promise that people's income tax, that people's VAT, that people's national insurance will not go up for the entire term of the next 5 years. And in fact, they would like to bring
Gloria,
it down.
very quick question, because we've got to go shortly, but very quick question. What is your definition of a working person?
Someone who goes to work and earns their money that way, and pensioners who have worked all their lives too. Basically everybody.
Everyone. OK, everyone is a working person. Good news, good news.
Unless they're a non-dom, work in North Sea oil and gas, or send their children to independent schools. Those are the 3 taxes.
Well,
right?
in just a moment, perhaps we'll put that question to the Labour candidate Nick Thomas-Symonds. So don't go anywhere. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today we've got 2 fantastic individuals who have invented a teddy bear to help children who are suffering with mental health.
Yes, so Lynn and Samantha Crilly came up with the idea for the Trouble Muncher toy following Samantha's own battle with an eating disorder and OCD.
Yes, the teddy comes with a notepad and encourages its owners to write down what's troubling them, and then they can pop the note into the rucksack on the bear's back.
I struggled with mental health most of my life, actually, and oh no, it's fine. I've got one. I feel quite sorry for you. But and one thing I always did was message my mum, and it was a thought disassociation kind of technique. I would message you. Even now, I message you thoughts that come into my mind, but massively when I was younger. And I thought, what happens if you're younger and you don't have this?
Yeah, and I think in today's technology-fueled world, I think we go back to basics, and it just helps them to process by writing it down. Everything's so instant these days.
So it's like an indirect way of telling your parents how you're feeling, what you're going through. Such a great idea. What's the feedback been from parents who have got a trouble muncher for their kids? What you got any stories?
It's been really good. In one household, he sits on the kitchen side, and I think during the day, the parents, the children put their worries in, or at night, and then they know that their parents will look at it during the day. And it's gone into some schools as well.
You'd imagine you'd want one of these trouble munchers in every classroom and in every school up and down the country, because children who are being bullied, for example, who feel like they can't tell their parents, they're too embarrassed to talk about it. This is such an important tool, isn't it, for children to communicate that?
Yeah, well, you were saying Mum's a mental health counsellor, and you had a young child who had Snapchat AI. So you talk to an AI in Snapchat, and that's what they talk to now.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Right, 1:16 is the time, and I'm joined by Shadow Minister without portfolio, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Nick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What is your definition of a working person?
Well, firstly, Emily, very good to join you this afternoon. Well, a working person is a person who works, or in the case of our pensioners, people who have worked. And when we're talking about working people, I think we have to be clear about the pressures that they have faced. And Keir Starmer was talking this morning, of course, about working people who often don't have savings. Unfortunately, there are millions of people in this country who have less than £1,000 of savings, and people as well who in recent years, due to the financial pressures they've been under, have been left without savings at all.
Keir Starmer did, your leader, OK, Keir Starmer did seem to suggest that his definition of working people excluded those with savings, and as you can imagine, this worries those with a little bit put away, that there may be a tax raid coming down the line.
No, it's not exclusionary, and I think Keir was talking there about his own experience. And when we get asked these questions, we do talk about our own experiences. And Keir, when he was growing up, was in a situation where the telephone was cut off because his family were unable to pay the bill. So when he's talking about working people without savings, he is somebody who knows exactly how that feels. And he often talks about his father, of course, who was a toolmaker, his mother, who was a nurse. So I think relating it to his own experience was actually quite a powerful thing to have done.
Certainly. It does seem, though, that there is a lot less specificity in these arguments than what was said in 2021. In 2021, in both Sir Keir's conference speech and in Rachel Reeves' conference speeches at the Labour Party conference in September, they both said that taxes are too low on assets, that they would like to raise taxes on assets but keep them lower on incomes, on work. This was the time that they were sort of floating ideas of rebanding council tax, because it is ludicrous, isn't it, Nick, that a house in Chelsea that's worth tens of millions of pounds pays less council tax than a house up in Darlington. Isn't that insane? Surely the Labour Party would be right to change that tax banding.
We will not change the council tax banding, but just, Tom, to address your point, 2021 to now, we've had huge and significant events that have happened since then. We've had, obviously, the chaos that was caused by the Trust Kwarteng mini budget in September 2022. We've also had Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So we've got, and all the effects that that's had. So we've had a significantly different financial picture. And frankly, when you have a situation where we're going to be, this Parliament is going to be the only Parliament in history where living standards are going to be lower at the end than they were at the beginning.
You're right that there's been this war.
Just one point, Tom. I will come to that, Tom. But just to say, Tom, just for a moment, the tax burden is at its highest level since 1948. That's why we are saying it isn't the right thing to start asking working people to pay more tax. They're already paying enough tax. That's why we've got to grow the economy, which is the plan that we're putting forward.
You're right. The tax burden in 1948 was 37.2% of GDP. It, of course, last year was 36.3% of GDP. Labour's plans, with extra taxes on the North Sea, with extra taxes on schools, with extra taxes that you have announced that are in your manifesto, not even the ones that we might speculate on, council tax or capital gains or anything like that. The ones you've announced takes the tax burden to 37.4% of GDP. That's your own numbers in your own manifesto. That's higher than in 1948. That's not the highest in 70 years. That's the highest in 200 years.
But they are very specific, aren't they, Tom? And they are identified now transparently and openly to the British public. Whether it is in terms of closing the VAT loopholes and business rates loopholes that are enjoyed by private schools, whether it's closing the loopholes in the Conservatives' non-dom tax policy on the principle that people who live here, make their home here, should pay tax on all their assets here, whether it's closing the tax gap that the National Audit Office has
You can't complain about a high tax burden and then say you're going to raise it even further.
Well, you can complain about a high tax burden and then actually say to the public at an election, we're not going to raise your income tax, we're not going to raise VAT, we're not going to raise national insurance, we're not going to put capital gains tax on primary residences, we're not going to change the council tax ban. So we are putting forward a real statement of intent in terms of our position, and it is as a consequence of the pinch that people are feeling out there.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Nick Thomas-Symonds, who is the Shadow Minister, thank you, without portfolio.
Well, Gloria De Piero is still with us, former Labour MP, because, Gloria, I saw out of the corner of my eye you nodding along to my sneaky question about the insanity, frankly, of taxing homes.
Oh, my goodness.
Banding these bans based in 1991.
No, I know. It's a real... But you can't reopen it. But I tell you what is absolutely wrong, Tom. So when I lived in Nottinghamshire, my council tax... My house was worth significantly less. It's probably bigger, but you know, you can get more bang for your buck up there. Oh my gosh, half, two-thirds, far lower. And the wages where I was living were lower than not just the national average, but the regional average too. So your point about the inequity of geographical inequity of council tax,
so now, 100%. So now you live in London, your house is worth twice as much, but your council tax is less.
It's probably, it's probably worth 3 times as much.
Wow.
Close to it. And my council tax is, maybe 100 quid a month less. I mean, significant.
It's crazy.
I mean, surely it should just depend on the needs of the local area.
Well, but then you get this inequity. I mean, that you're right. So there's probably higher numbers of people that live in my constituency in London or in my borough in London. So fewer, less need to charge more. The bins cost less because there's more people paying for the council tax.
It's not just about the areas, though, because it's the banding. And so there are some... So even within one local authority, there'll be some house prices that have changed more and some that have changed less compared to 1991. So setting the banding based on the value in 1991 means that some little flats that are now worth £10 million, but back then were worth £500,000, have the same level of tax.
The reason why I was nodding is there is a genuine geographical and regional inequity, which is impossible for anyone to justify.
Yeah.
Because people earn less in areas where they're forced to pay more.
Do you really believe the Labour Party will do nothing about it?
Well, you know, this is really... If I had the solution to this, because I used to sort of rage about this all the time when I was the MP, I'd be like, this is absolutely outrageous. Every time I get my council tax bill and you come down, when I have to move down here, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't have a simple solution, but please, pointy-headed people out there, please find one that is not going to really irritate people.
I'm sure think tank after think tank have looked into this and proposed their way of working it all out.
And put it into the too difficult, but all the politicians put it in the... Well, that's too difficult because we're going to get losers, but so many people in former coalfields are such big losers now.
I mean, the Labour Party are being disingenuous when they say that they're not going to be raising taxes. As Tom pointed out, it is, as a proportion of GDP, going to go up. And also, it's just saying that you're ring-fencing these 3 taxes on what they call working people.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other taxes, Gloria. And you know what? If you want to be the Prime Minister of this country, if you want to govern this country, tell us which taxes could be going up.
And there's manifestos there, and it's an absolute guarantee. The taxes that we all know and none of us love are not going up. I wouldn't be surprised, and I have no inside knowledge on this, I wouldn't be surprised if those working people who are most in need get a tax cut by the end of the 5 years of a Labour government. That's my instinct.
But Gloria, things like capital gains tax matter.
Those 3%.
They matter. They're taxes on investment. They're taxes on...
Emily,
these taxes do matter just because they're not those, you know, national insurance income tax VAT.
Are we going to have trickle down? Are we going to have trickle down because the richest 3%? Yeah, that always works
every year.
But anyway, the Labour Party have not said they're going to put up capital gains tax. You know, newspaper after newspaper after...
conversation every week. And you say,
and
you say, if the economy grew at the same rate it did when Gordon Brown was Chancellor, then we'd have a lot more money.
I didn't say that. But
can I finish the point?
Go on.
Because one of the first
then let her speak.
One of the first things Gordon Brown did as Chancellor was cut capital gains tax. Labour Chancellor reduced that tax because he thought it would boost growth.
That's a really good argument, Tom, and I have no reason to question it, but that just shows all these right-wing newspapers saying Labour's going to put up a capital gains tax. It's not going to happen. In fact, you've just demonstrated the only record that the Labour Party has on CGT, which I don't know, is...
OK, well, let's move away from the CGT question because the Labour Party have not ruled it out. They have not ruled out a rise in capital gains tax. They have ruled out some taxes, so we know they're capable of ruling out tax rises when they want to.
You can't ask them to write 5 budgets, Emma, like 5 years.
Well, when they're asked the question, I mean, Rachel Reeves has been asked the question. She's running for Chancellor.
Yeah,
is she not?
She says there's nothing that she wants to do that's promised in the manifesto that requires additional tax.
I don't want to do it, but will I do it? Are they two very different things, aren't they, Gloria?
I
am a cynic, yes.
And you may be proved right. I don't think you will. That's the only debate we can have.
OK, well, we won't do a bet, because I don't approve of such things, on the television anyway. Gloria, when it comes to immigration, Keir Starmer also asked about the boats. We saw yesterday another record day. 700-odd people crossed the Channel. It's getting absolutely out of hand. The government, the current government, well, the Conservatives do have a plan. Right, they have a plan. Keir Starmer says smash the gangs. I mean, we're already trying to do that, are we not?
I mean, look, let me be honest with you. I am not saying this is Labour's strongest area in terms of what they're saying. But I'll say one thing. An absolute promise to get immigration significantly down. Now, we've had that from 3 Tory manifestos. It's just gone up and up. So at least give the Labour Party a chance. And they're going to invest in this new border security guard or something that they're going to set up. They're going to clear all these people in hotels, 1,000 new case workers in the Home Office to clear that backlog. If you shouldn't be here, then you need to go. So this lot can't do it. Promise after promise. Give Labour a go.
Well, you know that those returns agreements are slightly difficult to construct, to agree with certain countries.
It's peculiar, isn't it? Because we've spoken to Yvette Cooper about this, and it seems to be the idea that just hard work can get these returns going. That would require negotiating with the Taliban. That would require sending certain people back to areas that are undeniably unsafe.
Listen, you can put the questions like that too. Well, no, because obviously we have responsibilities. We don't send people back to unsafe countries. The argument which I think we all accept is that there are people here who shouldn't be here. if you are seeking genuine asylum and refuge, but because there's so many people in hotels not getting the claims processed, then we don't know who's genuine or who should be. See you later.
Well, I mean, it's hard to keep up. I mean, 700 in just one day.
It's just
to build another hotel.
I mean, I agree with you.
Summer.
It's outrageous.
The Liberal Democrats have an idea, which is that...
Oh, do they?
Once people are in this country for more than 3 months and they're still waiting for their claims to be processed, why not let them work? Why not let them earn their own cash so that they're not put up by the taxpayer in a hotel?
For entering the country illegally, Tom.
I'm with Emily. Let's get the extra caseworkers in place. Let's find out who shouldn't be here, and let's get them out.
Oh, a bit of common sense from Gloria there.
Is the risk that they're all just rubber stamped through?
Yes, I think so.
No, that would be outrageous. I mean, seriously, this is Home Office. You know, this is their job, literally, to protect our borders. We're going to get another 1,000 of them, and you know, I think it is. I think we should assume that people who are employed to do that job will do that job and do it properly, and it's needed.
I love your optimism and hope in the capacity of the British state.
You two bring it out.
It is. No, I'm glad someone has that sort of hope in how efficient the government can really be.
To be fair, we do share our cynicism for everything, really, don't we, sometimes? Anyway, up next, are fast food shops ruining our town centres? We're going to be debating that next.
Very good afternoon to you. It's exactly 1:30. The top story from the newsroom, and we'll start with the latest breaking news from Stonehenge in Salisbury, where we're now hearing that 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested after throwing orange powder over the ancient monument. Video posted to social media shows those 2 campaigners running towards the stones with canisters of paint, and the demonstration comes ahead of the expected arrival of thousands of visitors for the summer solstice tomorrow. Rishi Sunak, in the last few moments, has called it a disgraceful act of vandalism to one of the world's oldest and most important monuments, adding that Just Stop Oil should be ashamed of their activists. The group, though, says that it wants any government to commit to ending the burning of oil, gas and coal by 2030. In other news, the jury in the trial of aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon has been unable to reach a verdict on charges over the death of their newborn daughter. The 37-year-old and 50-year-old are accused of manslaughter and other charges after their daughter Victoria was found dead in Brighton in a supermarket bag. The couple were arrested following a high-profile police search. Inflation has eased to 2%, increasing the prospect of an interest rate cut within months. It's the first time in nearly 3 years that the figure's been at the Bank of England's target. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says it's because of the Conservatives' plans for the economy. Labour, though, says the government has nothing to do with the figure. The UK has seen its highest day for migrant arrivals so far this year. The Home Office says nearly 900 people made their way by small boat across the Channel yesterday. A total of 15 boats were intercepted as they made the journey from France. Spanish police are searching for a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife while on holiday. Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old called a friend to say he was lost while hiking. He had no water and that his phone was on just 1% battery. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. Your next update at 2 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's how the markets are looking this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2727 and €1.1839. The price of gold is £1,830.36. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,206 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. High pressure today. That means most places are going to be fine. There'll be some warm sunny spells as well. Not entirely blue skies. There are a couple of things going on. First of all, some patchy cloud lingering across the UK under this ridge of high pressure as it builds in. And secondly, a weak frontal system, will bring thickening cloud and some spots of rain into the far north of Scotland through the day. A freshening breeze here, but otherwise plenty of sunshine, and the early cloud tends to disappear through the afternoon. So we're going to see some sunshine breaking out, where we get the sunshine feeling pleasant enough. 22 to 23 Celsius in the south, 21 Celsius further north. Although for northern and northwest Scotland, we do see further thickening of the cloud, especially for Lewis and Harris, with some outbreaks of rain moving in by the evening. But for much of the rest of Scotland, sunny skies remain as we end the day, and increasingly sunny skies for Northern Ireland, Northern England as well as for Wales, the Midlands. Plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures at 6 p.m. still at 20 or 22 Celsius. Now, by the later half of the evening, the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, along with a freshening breeze, push into western Scotland, eventually sinking into the central belt but tending to fizzle out. Meanwhile, across the rest of the UK, it's staying dry overnight with clear spells, but temperatures will dip in sheltered rural spots down to 4 or 5 Celsius across parts of England and Wales. So a fresh start to Thursday, but a bright start nevertheless. Plenty of sunshine first thing for England and Wales. There's always the threat of some showers making an appearance later across the far southeast, but for the vast majority it's going to stay dry. Long spells of sunshine, just some patchy cloud around, and highs of 23 or even 24 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello again to you, I'm Jules. Buckley, Worcester firstly, and the northbound A449 part blocked up towards the Red House Inn roundabout and queuing. A collision there causing delays. There's one as well in Bath. That means the lower Bristol Road to the A36 still closed off as a bumper there gets recovered. That's between the Broomhays turn off towards Windsor Bridge Road. Collingtree, Northamptonshire, the westbound A45. Now that's blocked between Saxon Avenue and the M1 Junction 15 turn off and queuing. It's due to a collision there, causing queues back towards the Queen Eleanor interchange. Chelsea Bridge in Battersea is closed in London and queuing for investigation work, and 3 lanes shut anti-clock on the M25. Chertsey at 11 to Wesley at Junction 10 is queuing back to Junction 12 for the M3 at the scene of a collision there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 1. Now, big question today. Should fast food shops be banned in city centres?
Well, Newcastle City Council certainly thinks so. They say they'll stop new outlets from opening near schools.
Well, they hope that this will deal with child obesity and rescue litter from their streets.
Well, joining us now is the chairman of the National Obesity Forum, Tam Fry. Tam, is this a little bit authoritarian?
No, not at all. For 25 years, the local councils have asked for more powers to control fast food shops opening in their areas, and that has not worked at all. So this is the next step whereby we're a little tougher and we say you can't have them. Unfortunately, many of our high streets and our town centres are littered with a profusion of fast food shops, to the exclusion of all kinds of other stores. And I think it's high time that we did something like this. You may feel it's a little draconian, but the writing's been on the wall for the last 15 years.
This is quite... if you read the detail on this, Tam, so Newcastle City Council, they say it will not allow new food outlets to open near schools where more than 10% of the Year 6 pupils are currently obese. So they've really dug into the detail here. They're picking specifically which schools have obese kids in them.
Yeah, we just have a terrible obesity problem with our children. And we've got to do everything possible. And if we don't, then those children will not just become obese, they'll become obese as adults with many other diseases as well. So, if you will, this is a preventative measure to try and limit the number of fast food shops which are...
So have I stepped into a parallel world? Am I going slightly mad here? I mean, we're not going to ban these children from going into shops. We're not going to sort of prevent shops selling anything other than vegetables. Are we living in some sort of parallel dystopia where some investor wants to open a private business and the government is telling them they can't because 10% of children who happen to live nearby happen to be obese? I mean, this is a very, very blunt instrument that probably won't even crack the nut.
It's been a blunt instrument, if you will, on the horizon for, as I say, 15 years. And the local entrepreneurs who want to open their shops have paid no heed to it whatsoever. And therefore, if you will, they've gone one step too far. And the council there has decided that enough is enough. It's not banning the shops. It's just making sure that they don't appear in specific places in the community.
Is there any evidence?
Yeah, what evidence do they have to suggest that this will actually curb obesity? Is it just sort of, we'll try it, why not?
Well, all children are measured now for their obesity at the year 6 of primary school. And therefore, the local councils know exactly what the situation is, how many healthy, how many undernutrition, how many overweight and how many obese people there are. And they can then say, right, the figure is 10%. Of our secondary school people are obese, and in those areas where they are going to school, there will not be any new opening of fast food shops.
We pretend we live in a free market. We really don't, do we? I mean, this is quite extraordinarily authoritarian. I wonder, Tam, I mean, where does it stop? Surely, I mean, what happens when all of these new shops are banned and we still have 10% of fat kids in various schools? What's next?
Well, the answer is that when it's been banned, then the local council has got to take a really good look at what the effect is. And if the effect is in the right direction, then maybe they'll reconsider. But what you also have to understand is that the local authorities have got to cope with the cost of obesity and all these other diseases. As a nation, it's £198 billion every year. And faced by that kind of figure, drastic action has to be taken.
I just don't understand the logic, though, because if they're bringing in this ban where kids are already obese, surely the skinny kids would be getting fat without the ban, so you should bring in the ban across the board.
Or maybe proximity to a shop that sells food isn't a direct correlation to how fat you are.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they are unsightly a lot of the time anyway. Thank you, Tam Fry. You're from the National Obesity Forum, Chairman.
Goodness me, I mean...
It's a big issue, obesity. It's a big issue, but these sort of interventions, do they really make a difference?
Well, maybe obesity is actually just transmitted through osmosis. If you stand next to a shop that sells unhealthy food, just of course you're going to swell in size. I mean, it defies all logic.
Well, Scotland's First Minister demands another independence vote. If they win a majority of seats in Scotland, he launched his party's manifesto. John Swinney went on to say that an independent Scotland would allow the SNP to invest in the NHS and help people through tough times.
Well, joining us now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. And Tony, what exactly was said earlier on today?
Good afternoon. Well, certainly, indeed, it was independence threaded all the way through today's manifesto announcement here in Edinburgh. John Swinney, First Minister, saying that independence is not separate to people's concerns. In fact, independence is a vital issue to people's concerns here in Scotland. We have a copy here, and in the front, the First Minister has said that this line at the front makes no bones about it, that this is a manifesto as well for this election for independence, and as promised by consecutive First Ministers, first line, first page of the manifesto, a vote for Scotland to become an independent, vote SNP, for Scotland to become an independent country. Now, the First Minister, as we say, spent a little bit of time. He also spoke about the NHS wanting to put some pressure on Westminster Government to match Scotland's spending, and this would release them and more capital to Scotland in terms of by way of the Barnett consequentials. And he also, as I say, went on to want to abolish the House of Lords. He wanted to scrap Trident, and quite a lot of claims that the SNP really have stuck to. And indeed, the First Minister was thoroughly challenged on whether very much of this 28-page document was any different to manifestos we've seen before, or indeed the one before that. Now, interestingly, he did speak quite abruptly about independence through the debate, and I believe we've got a little snippet of that to share with you just now.
Right, it doesn't look like we've got that little snippet to show, but thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire, for taking us through all of that. Sorry about that. We'll get that fixed, of course. Tony Maguire there up in Scotland.
I'm so disappointed that we didn't get to hear the dulcet tones of John Swinney.
Well, still to
another
come.
time.
Still to come, though. We're going to be hearing from Just Stop Oil. Why? Because they've decided to vandalise Stonehenge. Here we go. The classic orange powder all over the site. So I guess we're going to ask them how they justify this. It's Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The woke be with you these days, not the force be with you. And Star Wars, you know, it was the one thing as a kid that brought me and my brother together pretty close, and I love it with all my heart. But ever since Disney took it over, this diversity, equity and inclusion has run rampant throughout it. And actually we've had the actress from the latest Star Wars spin-off, a series on Disney, actually saying that making white people cry was actually what she wanted to do. Have a listen.
When people watch The Hate U Give, what do you want them to walk away with? Because I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal.
Yeah, so that diversity, equity and inclusion running rampant throughout Hollywood and ruining really good franchises. Actually ensuring, apparently, R2-D2, the little robot, you know, that scoots about and gets on the starships and all the rest of it, apparently that could be a lesbian now.
She's half white, this actress. This is what I don't understand. She's half Danish, then half African-American.
I have skin in this game, as you know, with a mixed-race child. Nobody ever sees a mixed-race child as half white. They see them as black.
We used to say that to focus on the colour of someone's skin was rampant racism and therefore we ought to reject it. Now we're saying actually potentially the only thing that we should notice about a person is the colour of their skin.
I don't really think she was actually wanting white people to be sobbing, and it wasn't malicious, but it's just this silly kind of ruination of something that's meant to be entertainment and fun. I wouldn't go as far as to say Star Wars is art. I'm not.
I love some.
It is, you know, excluding people. Yeah. It's actually dividing people. Once again, by the colour of their skin, we are teaching people to not like each other.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, it's 1:48 and Wiltshire police have arrested 2 people after they sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge.
Well, Just Stop Oil have shared a video saying it's to get the incoming government to sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels by 2030. Of course, Stonehenge famously associated with oil, gas. I think the 5,000-year-old Neolithic Britons were prolific users of the internal combustion engine, and they drilled for lots lots of oil, so it makes perfect sense, of course.
Yes, we're going to be joined by Jill Tainer, a spokesperson from Just Stop Oil. Jill, thank you very much indeed. What on earth is this all about? This is just criminal activity under the guise of some kind of activism.
No, that's not. That paint will be washed off really easily. So it's not long-lasting damage at all. Unlike the damage that is being done now by the fossil fuel industry and just keeping burning fossil fuels, putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. You're right. The Neolithic people were not prolific users of fossil fuels. They did not cause the kind of damage that we're causing now. That's all been within since the Industrial Revolution in the 150 years.
So because
this is when the damage has been done.
So because this stuff can be washed off, ergo there's no issue here. Well, Stonehenge aren't particularly happy about this. They've come out on their social media page and they say Stonehenge is protected by the Ancient Monuments Act and it is a criminal offence to damage the stones. There are also multiple rare lichen species growing on the stones that are also protected. So this isn't good for nature, is it?
I think you're getting things so out of perspective here. What isn't good for nature is the damage we're doing now, and what's not good for nature globally is not good for you, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people watching this programme. Because we now have the breakdown of the climate stability on which everything has evolved, all our agriculture systems, all the things that if you've got stable agriculture, you've got stable food supplies, you can start thinking about education and well-being. We disrupt those patterns as we are doing with this consistent burning of fossil fuels.
Sorry, Jill.
Then we're in big trouble.
Jill, was there more education and well-being before the Industrial Revolution or afterwards?
The two, that is not related in that way. We have been, since both before and after the Industrial Revolution, you and I have still been able to enjoy a stable climate. But now, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is so high that you can see the news. This is a list I wrote yesterday of all news stories about climate breakdown, climate extremes in different countries. That is threatening food supplies. You saw how people were upset about a shortage of toilet rolls during COVID. What's going to happen when we haven't got the food we want? What's going to happen to us?
We produced more food in the last year than has ever been produced before on the face of this planet.
There's a drought in the Mediterranean. Our farmers this year have only been able to plant something like on a third of their land. They haven't been able to put their seeds in the ground.
The productivity on that 1/3 of land is higher than the productivity would have been for the entire field only a few decades ago, because we can put nitrogen in the soil, because we have technological progress to produce so much more food on so much less land.
Right.
That's the beauty of the Industrial Revolution.
No, I'm not. There was something called the Green Revolution that was global and that went for this mass productivity that you're talking about. It has exhausted our soil, filled the airs with pesticides. I don't want to talk about all that because the arguments are so simple. The ones you're coming up with are simplistic and they're not right. But I haven't got time to do that right now.
Jill, do you think...
But what is true, just look out of the window, look at the news. Ask someone who's just come back from Greece. Ask someone who's planning a summer holiday in the Med this year. Look at America. Something like 1 in 5 Americans are now heated.
Okay, we understand you're deeply concerned. We understand, Jill, that you are deeply concerned about climate change. But let's try a different tack, because we're talking about this, assault on the Stonehenge. Essentially, that is what it is. How is that going to help? I mean, I'm looking at the reaction. I'm looking at the reaction on social media, and it's almost entirely people either mocking it or saying how much of a disgrace it is. It's hardly good for the cause, is it?
Listen, some people do that, and you perpetuate that because you choose to talk about this. We get on here, and it is if I said, hey, I'm Jill, I live in Stroud, I'd like to come on and talk about the dangers of climate change and what it's doing to us and why we have to stop burning fossil fuels.
We talk about net zero all the time. We talk about how to get there, how to improve the climate.
You don't. What, do you ever get... So this has happened. Why don't you say, OK, these people are protesting. Let's get some of the fossil fuel CEOs and ask them about the real damage they're doing, instead of asking some people about spraying a bit of orange powder paint. Get perspective, please, because this is really serious and really important. And all the scientists, I've been involved with climate science.
Yeah, I think we try and look for sensible solutions, though, Jill. That's the interesting discussion.
We've had 20, 30 years We've had 20, 30 years of politically pragmatic and sensible solutions. And in the meantime, we've burnt more and more fossil fuels.
In the meantime, China keeps, building those coal mines.
Well, you're going to start churning out the China thing. China's actually ahead of us in its investment in things. And
it's doing an all-in strategy. It's investing lots in renewables, absolutely, but also lots in fossil fuels as well. I just wonder, will you accept that we've reduced our carbon emissions by 50% since the 1990s?
In the UK, we've offshored our carbon emissions. We've done a lot. What the stuff we buy and stuff is largely made in other countries. So therefore, we're not.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's quite a lot of greenwashing. There's quite a lot of greenwashing. Sorry, Jill, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Sorry about that. Great to speak to you, spokesperson from Just Stop Oil. When we come back, Damian Hinds, Conservative candidate, will be talking to us about the campaign.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Higher pressure today. That means most places are going to be fine. There'll be some warm sunny spells as well. Not entirely blue skies. There are a couple of things going on. First of all, some patchy cloud lingering across the UK under this ridge of high pressure as it builds in. And secondly, a weak frontal system will bring thickening cloud and some spots of rain into the far north of Scotland through the day. Freshening breeze here, but otherwise plenty of sunshine, and the early cloud tends to disappear through the afternoon. So we're going to see some sunshine breaking out, where we get the sunshine feeling pleasant enough. 22 to 23 Celsius in the south, 21 Celsius further north. Although for northern and northwest Scotland, we do see further thickening of the cloud, especially for Lewis and Harris, with some outbreaks of rain moving in by the evening. But for much of the rest of Scotland, sunny skies remain as we end the day, and increasingly sunny skies for Northern Ireland, Northern England as well as for Wales, the Midlands. Plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures at 6 p.m. still at 20 or 22 Celsius. Now, by the later half of the evening, the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, along with a freshening breeze, push into western Scotland, eventually sinking into the central belt but tending to fizzle out. Meanwhile, across the rest of the UK, it's staying dry overnight with clear spells, but temperatures will dip in sheltered rural spots down to 4 or 5 Celsius across parts of England and Wales. So a fresh start to Thursday, but a bright start nevertheless. Plenty of sunshine first thing for England and Wales. There's always the threat of some showers making an appearance later across the far southeast, but for the vast majority it's going to stay dry. Long spells of sunshine, just some patchy cloud around, and highs of 23 or even 24 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 19th of June. My name's Tom Harwood.
I'm Emily Carver.
Now, earlier today, we heard from George Galloway as he launched his manifesto for the Workers' Party of Britain. And George Galloway joins us now. George, thank you so much for making the time for us today. I've been reading through your manifesto commitments. They seem pretty enticing. A retirement age of 60 from when you can draw the state pension, no tax paid below £21,200, and free travel for all children. I mean, it's a fairy tale wish list, isn't it?
No, as a matter of fact, until a year and a half ago, it was a 60 retirement age in France, that well-known revolutionary socialist economy. You used to be able to retire at 60 in France. Soon it will be 70 in Britain. And in France, there's a general election at the end of this month, and my equivalent in France is promising a return to the age of 60. Free travel for children on our buses would be a good thing, would it not? It would keep our children safe. It would occupy seats that are otherwise empty. Free bus travel for children is the norm in some areas, but not in others. We think it should be a national service. So there's no fairy tales involved here. I'll tell you what the fairy tale is, that we spend £12,000 per minute of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year on nuclear weapons. Go out and ask the people whether they'd rather have free travel for their kids, be able to see a GP, get a medical appointment at the hospital, or any of the other things in our manifesto, or blow it on nuclear weapons.
I mean, George Galloway, you know as well as anyone that we live in a dangerous world, and you're not only advocating to get rid of the nuclear deterrent, but also to remove ourselves from NATO altogether.
Yeah, well, NATO's the reason we're in the dangerous world. When the Soviet Union promised to withdraw from East Germany and tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev was promised by the American president that NATO would not expand, and I quote, 1 inch to the east, since which they've expanded thousands of miles to the east and are now ringing Russia with NATO nuclear weapons. That's what's brought us to the cusp of World War III, and our politicians are hoping that the public doesn't notice that. But they will notice it if they listen to me.
You're true to say that the nuclear deterrent is not free. It costs £3 billion a year out of our £56 billion annual MOD budget. Pensions cost £112.5 billion a year. They're scheduled to rise, even with the rising age of retirement. The cost of pensions, because we've got more and more people reaching that age, fewer and fewer people in work, and a triple lock increasing these pensions, they're scheduled to reach £200 billion. You can't make up almost £100 billion of spending with £3 billion of savings.
Well, you neatly discounted the cost of the nuclear weapons in the first place. You talked only of the annual running cost. But the cost of the nuclear weapons, the cost of our now bloated military budget, which is being ratcheted up in a Dutch auction between the two main parties as to who can spend the most on weapons and war, is astronomical and about to become more astronomical still. You're going on about 822 illegal migrants landing on a beach. You don't need to be Nelson and turn a Nelson's eye. Where were the ships? The ships were in the Red Sea, in the Black Sea, in the South China Sea, in every sea except our own
George,
sea.
that's a good point to raise.
Everywhere
What would your party, what would you do about illegal immigration?
Well, we would be stopping it. And for a start, we
with
wouldn't
warships,
be invading
George
the
Galloway?
from which these people we wouldn't be... Sorry?
With warships, George Galloway, you suggested that we're having small boats come across the Channel because we've got warships in the Red Sea. Would you shoot down these migrant boats?
Do you want me to answer? Do you want me to, do you want me to
Sorry,
answer?
I think we've got a delay on the line. Go ahead.
Sure. The Royal Navy's principal purpose and duty is to defend the shores of Her Majesty's, His Majesty's realm. But they're not doing so. They're in every sea except our own sea. And they are not involved in turning back illegal departures from France, illegal arrivals in England, which then cost £80 a night per person, potentially forever, to the British taxpayer.
George Galloway, by implication,
we've got all these. We've got all these Royal Navy assets. The problem is they're deployed everywhere except defending our own shores. So I was answering you, and if we've got a delay on the line, forgive me. I was answering you that we would not be invading all these countries from which these refugees are coming. But that being said, we certainly wouldn't allow them to leave unmolested from the beaches of France. We paid France billions of pounds to stop these illegal departures. And I saw a news bulletin last night in which the French authorities were watching these illegal departures.
George Galloway, when you won the by-election, you said, Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. Would a win for you now be for Gaza?
It would be a win for peace, but yes, it would be a win for Gaza. I know you don't give a damn about Gaza, as is evident from the contempt dripping in your voice with that question. But I assure you that millions of people in Britain care about the little children and their mothers being torn apart in Gaza, and many of them are prepared to vote to show it.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. George Galloway, great to speak to you on your manifesto launch day. Good stuff.
You've got some vintage Galloway there, I think, some proper sort of oratorical ability that I think you don't see in many members of Parliament, although I do think, I mean, looking at these sums, it just doesn't add up. I mean, it really, really doesn't.
Retirement at age 60, yes. Well, Rishi Sunak has pledged further tax cuts after inflation returned to the Bank of England's 2% target. It's the first time inflation has been at this level in 3 years.
Well, let's cross to our political editor, Christopher Hope. He's been following the campaign, the Conservatives in their campaign today. Chris, is Rishi Sunak really taking credit for this drop in inflation? Isn't that what the Bank of England's supposed to do?
Well, yes, of course, you're technically right that may be the case, but certainly what the PM says he's done right is get the economic choices right post the chaos of Liz Truss's short-lived premiership, and that's why he would say inflation has fallen by a huge amount since the over 10% it was when she became leader and Prime Minister, and that's what he's been talking about today on a visit to Suffolk Coastal, a seat held by Therese Coffey, the former key ally of Liz Truss, with nearly 20,000 majority. We're seeing a theme here, Emily and Tom, of the PM visiting very, very safe Tory seats, like 25,000 yesterday, Geoffrey Cox, 20,000 today, Therese Coffey. These are not seats which are marginal seats, which the party did win in 2019. These are seats which the party should win in a bad day, a bad election day, and that shows the level of defensiveness, I think, in the Tory campaign just 2 weeks to go. But he was asked today about those record numbers of small boats arrivals. We featured them yesterday on GBNews. Today the Home Office confirmed that 880 arrived yesterday, illegally arrived immigrants came here yesterday in 15 small boats. The total for 2024 so far this year is higher than in 2022 and 2023, and maybe that gives a clue as to why he went for an early election campaign when no one else forecast it. But this is what he had to say earlier to reporters.
In the last 12 months, the numbers of people crossing the channel is actually down by almost a third. That hasn't happened before, and it shows that we can make a difference. That's what I've been focused on doing. But look, there's a choice at this election.
That highest number yesterday.
There's a choice. There's always going to be days which are worse than others. But the choice of this election is about how do we solve this problem for good. I've got a plan to do that, and that's about getting an incentive up and running, or deterrent up and running, removing the incentive for people to come here. It's as simple as that. If people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to remove them somewhere else. And if we can get that up and running, then people will stop coming. And multiple other European countries agree with us. That's a choice for people at this election. If you want that deterrent, then you need the flights to go to Rwanda. That's what I'll deliver. In contrast, Keir Starmer's going to let everyone out of the detention centres, offer an amnesty, make us a soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration. And I don't think that's right.
That's the PM earlier speaking to reporters in East Anglia. I should say, Tom and Emily, before I throw it back to you, that in the past half hour, he's commented, the PM, on the vandalism by Just Stop Oil protesters to Stonehenge. He's called a disgraceful act to one of the UK's and world's most oldest and most important monuments.
Really profound moment in this campaign. We will be getting comment from the Labour Party on that as well as the afternoon rolls on. But Christopher Hope, thank you very much for bringing us the very latest there from the Conservative campaign battle bus.
Well, Minister of State for Schools, Damian Hinds, joins us now. Damian, some good news today about inflation hitting that 2% target, but can the Conservatives really take credit for it?
Yes, it is good news that inflation's back down to 2% to the target. It's a result of a lot of hard work and sticking with a plan. We'd made reducing inflation the number one goal because that is the best way to help families with their budgets and their costs. And we've reached that point today. That is of course something to be welcomed. But we need to stick with that plan, and that's what's at stake on the 4th of July. Do we stick with that plan that's working, or do we go for a new course which involves higher taxes for households up and down the country?
Isn't the choice here between higher taxes and even higher taxes? I mean, currently, the percentage of the economy taken by tax is 36% of GDP. The Labour Party plan to raise it to 37.4% of GDP. That's the spending and the tax that they've announced in their manifesto. But because of these frozen thresholds, despite tax cuts that Rishi Sunak has announced, the Conservatives will raise it as well. Not as much as the Labour Party, but the percentage of the economy being taken by tax is going up in the next few years under your plans, not down.
Look, tax right now is higher than we want it to be. We want to reduce tax. There have been some extraordinarily high costs that the country has faced, the £98 billion of furlough and the self-employment business support schemes in COVID, and of course the big cost of living support payments as well. Over time, we need to chart a course which brings tax down while also being able to afford the excellent public services that we need, that we want, that we value, and particularly things like the National Health Service, where we know demand is going to increase over time. And that ends up being all about economic growth. And so I think in many ways the framing at this election is which of the two parties, Labour or Conservative, which do you think has the more credible plan for growth? And I think if you look at our record since 2010, with the unemployment rate coming down by almost half, 600,000 fewer children in workless households, we're now third highest foreign direct investment in the world after the United States and China. I think we've got that record for the economy to keep on growing.
Damian Hinds, a new poll has dropped. That might come as a bit of a shock to some Conservatives. This is relating to Clacton, where Nigel Farage is running. Now, the Conservatives got 72% of the vote there last time around. Now it's looking like it's going to be the biggest swing in modern history, with Nigel Farage on course to win. I mean, your reaction to that?
Well, I haven't seen that poll. I don't spend a lot of time looking at polls. There is one poll that I'm really, really focused on. It happens on July the 4th and closes at 10 o'clock. And we are out knocking on doors, meeting as many people as possible, holding public meetings, hearing from people. Yes, hearing their concerns. Yes, that includes hearing their frustrations, but also presenting what really is the choice between a Labour government that's going to raise your tax in all sorts of ways, we don't even know what and how much and for what end, or a Conservative government that is going to stick with a plan that is working, that has brought down inflation and does have prospects for economic growth into the future to afford the great public services that I know people all value.
Yeah, the latest numbers we had, of course, for April was economic growth at zero, flatlining. Nothing. And of course, it's nice to have.
So, Tom, as you know, you should never look at a one month figure for growth, because it always depends on which month Easter fell in or when the school holidays were.
Of course, and across the quarter it is growing.
You should always look at a quarter.
Yeah. And across the quarter it is growing, but it's nothing to write home about. It's nothing to boast about. I mean, it's sclerotic growth, and this is true, to be fair, of the French economy, the German economy, the Italian economy, the Canadian economy. In fact, just about the only economy in the group of seven G7 nations, advanced economies, is the American economy. They're going gangbusters, whereas all of us are being left in the dust. What is America doing right that, frankly, Britain and everyone else is doing wrong?
Look, there have been tough times, as we all know. There is war in Europe as we speak, and there remain a number of difficulties hanging over from previous events that countries are dealing with. But if you look at our record since 2010, we have had the third highest rate of growth in the G7, and also for the time ahead, for the years to come, we are projected to have the third highest rate of growth in the G7, the highest among the European G7
the tallest dwarf, one might say.
That's because of the economic plan that we have in place, because we have a business-friendly, investment-friendly approach, and that's what attracts businesses to innovate here, to invest here, to come here, to create jobs here. And that story on employment, on reducing the unemployment rate by almost by half since 2010, I think is an incredibly important thing, and one that perhaps people haven't focused enough on this yet in this election campaign. No Labour government has ever left office with a lower rate of unemployment than when it came in. We have been absolutely focused on getting people into jobs, quality jobs, and building up the skills level for our productivity and economic growth.
Damian Hinds, are you pleased with how the campaign's going? Do you think Rishi Sunak is taking enough risks? I mean, you're quite far behind in the polls. Wouldn't it be worth, stepping things up a bit? It all seems a little bit lacklustre.
I don't think election campaigns are about, how much risk do you want to take on. I think they're about deciding what you think is the best approach for the next 5 years for the country, and putting that to people straightforwardly and honestly.
But it's not working, though, is it?
And also, to be fair, and also drawing a contrast with what the other side are offering, because this is a competitive process. You say it's not working. I'll tell you one thing. This is my, I think, 6th general election as a candidate, my 10th as a campaigner. I have never known, 2 weeks out, I've never known there to be nearly so many undecided voters on the doorstep as there are this time. There are still a lot of people very actively considering, very carefully considering how they're going to cast their votes. And what we are doing is trying to set out why it should be for the positive vision put forward by the Conservatives, but also highlighting the risks of Labour and the risks if you don't vote for either of those. Effectively, that is helping Labour, can put Labour into government, or even, you know, if you're somebody who already thinks Labour are headed for government, could hand them a blank cheque majority.
It's interesting because you in this interview have referenced things that have changed since 2010, and yet when the Prime Minister was asked that question in the first head-to-head debate with Rishi Sunak against Keir Starmer, he said, I don't want to look at the past, I want to look at the future. I mean, was that a mistake? Because
we are looking at the future.
But Rishi Sunak, when he's asked this question, he can't point to 3 successes of the last 14 years.
Well, we are talking about the future. My point in looking at our record since 2010 was, a big question of this election is who is most to be trusted in terms of economic growth, getting people into jobs, keeping people into jobs, making sure they are decently paid, quality jobs. And I think our record since 2010 gives the evidence for that. The record of Labour governments in the past does not, and that is a clear choice in this election.
Well, Damian Hinds, thank you very much for joining us and talking through what is another thrilling day of this exciting general election campaign.
Now, we did mention Clacton, where Nigel Farage is running. The other candidates are Matthew Bensalem for the Liberal Democrats, Craig Jamieson for Climate Party, Tony Mack, an independent, Natasha Osborne for the Green Party, Yovana Wasuna-Paul for the Labour Party, Tassos Papanastasiou for the Heritage Party, Andrew Pemberton for UKIP, Giles Francis Watling for the Conservative Party. There you go.
It's good to know that entire list. It was a lot nicer and shorter before Nigel announced, and then suddenly all these candidates flock in, but got to be fair to them. Now, the Spanish police are continuing their search for a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife.
Yes, the 19-year-old Jay Slater from Lancashire was on holiday with friends to attend the NRG Music Festival.
Well, Chris Elkington is the editor of the Canarian Weekly. He joins us from southern Tenerife. Because, Chris, this is a deeply concerning story. It's every family's nightmare.
Yes, absolutely. It's the worst thing, isn't it? You let your kids go on holiday and then you get this news whilst they're away. He did come over with friends, so you'd think there'd be safety in numbers. But at some point after the third day or after the third evening of the festival, somehow JJ got split up from his friends, decided to go with some other people for an after party, if you like, at someone's apartment. And that's the last we've heard of him in the morning when he left there to try and find a bus back to Las Americas where he was staying.
And Chris, do you know a little bit? Can you give us a little bit of insight into how this police search is going on? Where are they looking exactly, and how many people are involved in this search?
OK, well, Jay's last location was about 30 miles up the west coast from Las Americas, around an area called Masca and the Teno Roro Park, which is a well-known area for hikers. There's a lot of trails there. It's a very barren landscape, quite deserty, and also up into the forestal areas. The police search actually started on Monday afternoon, which was very soon after, in Spanish terms, after someone went missing. Because of the final phone call he made to his friends and the fact his phone battery ran out and he didn't know where he was. So the police, the Guardia Civil, are leading the investigation with mountain rescue teams. They've also had dogs out, sniffer dogs out on the trails. And the areas they can't reach on foot, they've actually deployed drones and the help of helicopters from above to try and find something. It would be very easy for Jay to veer off route without having his mobile phone for location or to look for a trail, because it's a sort of area, if you go hiking, you want to make sure you've got the right footwear because it's quite a dangerous terrain or a mountainous terrain. You want to make sure you've got water. You definitely don't want to go by yourself, and you certainly want to make sure you've got enough phone signal to find your route or to call for help. So the aerial assistance is very important in this case because there's a lot of deep ravines and valleys in that area. It covers quite a big area, and temperatures are currently around about 25, 26 degrees Celsius, so it's very warm as well. So it is. There's a big team out there looking. They stopped last night, obviously at sunset, because they can't look overnight, and resumed first thing this morning. And Jay's family and friends have also up in the area looking. The local police are now stopping cars and vans in all parts of this area along the west and south coast and searching vehicles just in case, obviously, he's found in a car for some reason. Maybe someone, picked him up or he hitched a lift. So it is a massive, massive search for Jay in this part of the island.
Well, Chris Elkington, thank you so much for talking us through this really concerning story. Editor of Canarian Weekly, really appreciate your time.
Well, it's still to come. Inflation, as we've said, has dropped to the Bank of England target of 2%. Will that mean a drop to the interest rate? We'll speak to one of the UK's top economists to find out. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. Make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. If you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there is obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programmes like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, the Prime Minister's hoping, of course, that today's inflation news might provide a boost to his campaign. But what do voters think? Well, our South West reporter, Jeff Moody, has been speaking to Bill Green, a farmer in North Devon.
Everybody wants to see inflation come down. A small amount of inflation, I think, is often a good thing. I think it brings our inflation down below many of our major competitors, and I guess theirs will follow us down. I think our economy is running parallel to many of the world economies and doing just as well, if not a bit better. So I think it's good news. I think it's good news for the government, good news for the country. I'm not sure it's good news for Labour, and I'm sure they won't present it as such.
Well, with this fall in inflation, will the Bank of England finally cut those interest rates? Let's speak to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist and co-founder of investment platform Regionally. Justin, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. So that is the question on everyone's lips. Will we see an interest rate cut soon? Are you there, Justin?
Yeah, well, cross out the word soon and just say, yeah, already cutting them already. Because if you think back last year, we had actually a significant period where rates were going to go up. Why? Because you actually had the economy being threatened by supply chains. Now, this is what was so stupid. The Bank of England...
Justin, your line is a bit rubbish. We'll try and reconnect with you. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, economist. That's a shame. I'm not sure what he was saying. Was he saying that we can expect one?
Well, it seemed that his thoughts were concertinaed by the technology, but we'll see if we can re-establish that line. Because it is something that is deeply concerning, because a lot of people thought we would get an interest rate cut by now. And we haven't had one yet, evidently. But it does seem that, to some extent, what happens in this country is contingent on what happens in the United States of America, where inflation's actually been going up, not down in some of the recent reportings. So to some extent, I think one of the big questions is, does it matter? I mean, even if inflation is continuing to go down in the UK, if it's going up in the United States, if it's not going down as quickly in the Eurozone, will that actually have more of an impact on the Bank of England's decision on rates than what happens in this country?
What happens if inflation falls below that 2%? Do we get into dangerous waters in terms of deflation? Is that a possibility?
Well, if inflation is above 3% or below 1%, the Bank of England governor has to write a letter to the Chancellor explaining why they're failing in their target if it's that far off the bound. So I think if it was a little bit below 2%, it wouldn't be too much of a worry. If it's below 1%, that becomes a real big worry because deflation delays spending.
Yes, because prices rising a little bit is actually a good thing. You want to have around the 2%, that's why it's the target. But yes, if it falls lower than that, then the alarm bells in the opposite direction start ringing.
The big risk is that if you see prices are going down, why would you buy something today? You're going to delay that spending, and that's going to shudder your economy. That's going to stop your economy from moving, because everyone will be thinking, oh, it'll be better to do it next week, or the week after, or the week after.
So it doesn't look like we're going to get Justin back, but it's Scotland versus Switzerland in the Euros this evening. But after that 5-1 defeat to Germany last week, is it game over for the Scots? No, let's be a bit more optimistic for the Scots. Could they win? Could they win?
Could they win? Could pigs fly? Well, that's after the news headlines.
Oi.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2:30. The top stories from the newsroom today. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested on suspicion of damaging Stonehenge after orange paint was thrown over the monument near Salisbury. The demonstration comes ahead of the expected arrival of thousands of visitors for the summer solstice tomorrow. Rishi Sunak has called it a disgraceful act of vandalism to one of the world's oldest and most important monuments. The group says it wants any government to commit to ending the burning of oil, gas and coal by 2030. The jury in the trial of aristocrat Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon has been unable to reach a verdict on charges over the death of their newborn daughter. The 37-year-old and 50-year-old are accused of the manslaughter and other charges of their daughter Victoria, who was found dead in Brighton in a supermarket bag. The couple were arrested following a high-profile police search. George Galloway says his Workers' Party is the antidote to Labour and Reform UK as he launched his manifesto in Manchester earlier. He says he wants a referendum on the transition to net zero and that he would scrap ULEZ. Meanwhile, in Edinburgh, the SNP launched its manifesto. Leader and Scotland's First Minister John Swinney says he wants to commit to a return to the European Union. The mother of a British teenager who has gone missing in Tenerife says having to search for her son is horrendous. Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old had called a friend to say he was lost while walking 11 hours on foot with no water and his phone on just 1% battery. And in France, campaigning is underway after President Macron's surprise call for snap elections. Jordan Bardella, the president of the National Rally, says that if elected, he'd back Ukraine, but not supply it with any long-range weapons. Mr Bardella, who's just 28, shares leadership of the party with Marine Le Pen and is widely expected to become France's Prime Minister if the National Rally wins the election on the 7th of July. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Higher pressure today. That means most places are going to be fine. There'll be some warm sunny spells as well. Not entirely blue skies. There are a couple of things going on. First of all, some patchy cloud lingering across the UK under this ridge of high pressure as it builds in. And secondly, a weak frontal system will bring thickening cloud and some spots of rain into the far north of Scotland through the day. Freshening breeze here, but otherwise plenty of sunshine, and the early cloud tends to disappear through the afternoon. So we're going to see some sunshine breaking out, where we get the sunshine feeling pleasant enough. 22 to 23 Celsius in the south, 21 Celsius further north. Although for northern and northwest Scotland, we do see further thickening of the cloud, especially for Lewis and Harris, with some outbreaks of rain moving in by the evening. But for much of the rest of Scotland, sunny skies remain as we end the day, and increasingly sunny skies for Northern Ireland, Northern England as well as for Wales, the Midlands. Plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures at 6 p.m. still at 20 or 22 Celsius. Now, by the later half of the evening, the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, along with a freshening breeze, push into western Scotland, eventually sinking into the central belt but tending to fizzle out. Meanwhile, across the rest of the UK, it's staying dry overnight with clear spells, but temperatures will dip in sheltered rural spots down to 4 or 5 Celsius across parts of England and Wales. So a fresh start to Thursday, but a bright start nevertheless. Plenty of sunshine first thing for England and Wales. There's always the threat of some showers making an appearance later across the far southeast, but for the vast majority it's going to stay dry. Long spells of sunshine, just some patchy cloud around, and highs of 23 or even 24 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Somerset firstly, and in Bath, the lower Bristol Road, the A36, that remains shut between the Broome Hayes turn-off towards Windsor Bridge Road. Recovery work underway from the scene of a previous collision. Now, Battersea in London, the Chelsea Bridge remains closed both ways, a bump there being investigated. Seeing queues to Grosvenor Road and the Chelsea embankment either side, diverting via Vauxhall and Battersea bridges, so they're slow. And in the West End, the one-way street, Cavendish Place, that's closed off for emergency repairs between Cavendish Square up towards Regent Street, causing queues. Anti-clock M25, an earlier bump now on the hard shoulder, still causing queues towards Wisley at 10, and Horsham in West Sussex. Southbound A24 blocked at the Hobbo's Park and Ride roundabout and queuing. That's due to a collision there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, it's coming up to 3 o'clock, and Martin Dobney is going to be up next until 6 o'clock. I wonder what he's got on his menu for us today. Martin, are you there? Are you there? Yes, you are. Excellent. What's coming up?
I am. Can I just say, guys, what a joust you had with George Galloway. Marvellous. I've watched it about 3 times. Well done. You held him to account. Very, very entertaining it was too. What have we got coming up? Well, today is Judgment Day on the polling. 2 massive polls dropped today. One at 4 o'clock, one at 5 o'clock, expected to paint an apocalyptic vision of what it means for the Conservative Party. All that's up for grabs is the size of that supermajority? Can the Lib Dems resurge? Can they get over their Clegg mania years? Will the Reform Party break through? We'll have all of those polls as they land with full analysis, plus follow the money. We're going to ask a bookie. The bookie doesn't lie. The markets don't lie. Could reformers be underrepresented in the polls? Could the Reform do even better than the polls say? And which Tory big beasts look nailed on to lose their seats? We'll have full analysis. And Stonehenge will be live from the site. The cultural vandals at Just Stop Oil desecrating a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the tree huggers Mecca. What were they thinking? Even their own supporters must agree this was an act of cultural desecration. They should be banged up in jail. And I'll be joined by Professor Carol Sikora, the legendary oncologist, looking at the fact Britain's cancer outcomes are 20 years behind Sweden, Denmark, other European nations. He agrees with Nigel Farage. Only a root and branch overhaul of the NHS can get us back into line with our European counterparts. All coming up, 3 till 6.
Martin sounds absolutely jam-packed, and I can't wait to see what the aftermath is at Stonehenge. Great that we've got a reporter heading there. Martin, look forward to it.
Such a bizarre choice, isn't it? Stonehenge. The night before the summer solstice. It's an English heritage site.
Yeah.
It's a natural wonder in some ways. But hey, yes, I think a lot of people would like to see those people banged up. Anyway, Scotland will attempt to rescue their Euros campaign as they face Switzerland this evening.
Well, manager Steve Clarke says it's important they bounce back from their 5-1 defeat to hosts Germany.
Obviously, they want to go back to the pitch and play better. So I think that's pretty standard when you play so poorly and you let yourself down. You want to go out and make amends. So that's where their mentality is.
Right, well,
sorry for him.
Oh, you don't need to feel sorry. Let's go to our Scotland reporter in Edinburgh. It's all to play for still, Tony Maguire. Tony, you must be getting excited for this match. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen?
Good afternoon. Well, you know, I think I'm going to keep my thoughts on tonight's match to itself. Switzerland performed pretty well against Hungary earlier in the tournament, winning 3-1, and of course that 5-1 defeat at the hands of Germany. Well, you know, many of our countrymen up here are still licking our wounds from that one. But, you know, I think, you know, we look to the Scotland manager, Steve Clarke, we heard from there, you know, and he actually commented on how he reacted to that 5-1 defeat. And he said that he had to kick a couple of backsides, give a few cuddles and make the players understand why that result happened. But of course, up here in Scotland, hope springs eternal, not least when it comes to football in these international tournaments. And I went to Glasgow to actually ask the people, you know, what their thoughts were ahead of tonight's big game. But there was a bit of a twist, so we gave the choice to people to choose between the good old favourite Scottish tablet and the Swiss chocolate, and do the most unscientific pop psychology test to see whether that betrayed what their thoughts were about tonight's match. And I think you'll see the results pretty much speak for themselves.
Does that mean that you're both hopeful of a Scotland win tomorrow night?
Aye. It would be good, but
Switzerland played well.
Maybe Scotland always. We'll see. No
That's
Scotland,
a very
no
sitting on the fence answer. No?
Oh,
no white tablet? All right, okay.
Scotland are going to win. They're going to bring the Euros home. Get it back to Scotland in you.
Well, if they keep it going, maybe they should.
Okay.
Maybe they should. Maybe there's a few parallels, you know, between Germany.
Optimistically, one each. Go for a draw.
I feel like you should get a bit of tablet as well. Do you want a bit of tablet?
Yeah, fair enough.
If Scotland go out early, will you support England?
No.
Absolutely not.
No chance.
No. No. Definitely not. No chance.
Well, what? No. No. No.
Perfect.
So let's not forget, in the independence referendum, 55% of Scotland obviously voted to remain as part of the UK. You know, there is a definitely countrymanship here. But when it comes to football, let's face it, all bets are off. Still, all eyes will be on Scotland, who could be facing first in, first out if they don't win tonight.
Scotland can stay on for as long as they can, although perhaps the trophy might be a little bit too much, too ambitious this time around. But Tony Maguire, thank you so much. Really great to hear the voices of the people of Glasgow.
I think you're a bit pessimistic, Tom. A bit mean. You know, they're gearing up for a match this evening, and you're just, you know...
Being realistic?
Well, there's no need for being realistic when it comes to this sort of thing, you know? Just be like, you know, good luck.
No. This is. We need
don't have to be cynical about everything.
This is a hard-hitting news show. We've got to get to the truth, even if it's an uncomfortable truth. We've got to get to the truth.
Well, let's hope you look silly tonight. Anyway, coming up, it's the Hall of Shame, but for celebrities. Now, following Justin Timberlake's arrest for drink driving, we'll be comparing some mugshots of a very famous lineup. Stay tuned for this. It's a funny one.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
98-year-old veteran Ken Cook shared his memories of D-Day at a special event in Harrogate. As a former Green Howards private, Ken was part of an armada of vessels carrying more than 150,000 Allied soldiers to France. And he was just a teenager when his regiment landed on Gold Beach in Normandy.
Everybody was telling us, the officers and the sergeants, corporals, they're telling, get off the beach, lads, quick, because there's some more stuff coming behind us, and they had to get onto the beach as well. All our equipment and tanks and whatever, artillery, they were following up behind us, so we had to get out of the way and get into the countryside and make as much ground as we could on that first day.
Ken survived that harrowing first day, but many didn't. Around 10,000 Allied troops were either killed or injured. But their sacrifice, along with the bravery of those that lived, changed the course of history and resulted in the end of World War II.
Because somebody had to do it, and so we did it. We did our job, and that's it.
Ken is one of the last surviving members of York's Normandy veterans. Part of an ever-dwindling band of brothers who fought on D-Day, he's attending the 80th commemoration in France.
A very emotional occasion this time, because there's not many of us left now.
Remembering the fallen, Ken's wish is that long after he's gone, we still never forget those who gave their tomorrow for our today.
The People's Channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, 2:46 is the time. And another quick reminder for you that the State of the Nation show is live with Michael Portillo tonight at 8 o'clock. He's got a huge amount planned, I've heard, anyway, that Michael has a rip-roarer of a show tonight at 8 o'clock, so you don't want to miss it. So there you go. There is Michael Portillo.
Indeed, but let's have a look at what's been going on in South Wales. For the first time in 40 years, industrial action is being taken by staff at Tata Steel, starting with an overtime ban.
Yes, this comes as the company plans to change the structure of the firm. That will see 2,800 jobs lost. Our national reporter Theo Jacombo reports from South Wales.
Since the 1960s, when you think of Port Talbot, you think of steel. But that could be coming to an end as the owner's Indian company Tata plan to close 2 furnaces that will see thousands lose their jobs. Jason, an electrical engineer, has worked here for 25 years.
Since leaving school, I've been in the steel industry. So I've built my family around the steel industry. I've been part of the very loyal, committed workforce. So yeah, basically everything I've got is all part of what I've achieved through the steel industry. Said we're fighting for that future, we're fighting for that existence, for that to carry on.
Tata Steel say the reason for the closure is that they have been losing over £1 million a day. Meanwhile, the government say without their support package, many thousands more would have lost their jobs here in Port Talbot and the wider supply chain. And that's why thousands of steel workers like Ian say they won't give up without putting up a fight, especially with the general election around the corner.
Yeah, because up until, Rishi Sunak announced the general election, we were looking at 500 million from the government, and what do we do? But that hasn't been signed, so, the new Labour government hopefully coming in, they've been quite forceful in saying they will not support 500 million for 2,800 job losses. They want a better transition that saves jobs and grows the industry. So I think we're at a pivotal point of what we can do here.
The steel industry contributes £2.4 billion into the UK economy every year. One of a number of reasons why United Unions say the deal they've been offered is disastrous for their members.
There are workers here who've been here for decades. We've got all of that experience here, and to lose this site and to lose that work is an absolute disaster for Britain. And I think that, during the general election, this is absolutely a key issue. Supporting British industry, ensuring that we're competitive, that we're productive, that there are good, well-paid jobs for British people is really important.
While the future is uncertain for thousands who have kept the fires burning in Port Talbot, Tata Steel's ambitions for a greener future come at a cost for those who call this place home. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
It's so hard to see how steel can be, frankly, viable to be made in this country unless we bring down the price of industrial energy. I mean, it's twice as expensive to make this stuff in the UK, or to get the energy for this stuff in the UK, than it is in the United States. I mean, no wonder these places are closing. We just can't be competitive with this price of energy.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do that this is an industry that people will say is of utmost importance for us to make in-house because it's of such strategic importance.
So should we be spending billions subsidising it? I mean, wouldn't it be better to have an all-in energy policy so we don't need to subsidise the steel making?
But we don't have that, do we?
No,
chicken before the egg. Anyway, Justin Timberlake faces a charge of driving while intoxicated after being pulled over by police in the early hours of Tuesday morning.
Well, the pop star had his mugshot released yesterday by Sag Harbor Police Department in New York. And to be honest, it doesn't really look like a mugshot, does it? It looks better than most people's passport photographs.
Yes, he doesn't seem to have aged much, but it all got us thinking about celebrity mugshots from history, or recent history, anyway.
Of course, let's have a look at Robert Downey Jr. Now, this was perhaps the nadir of his career, but my goodness, not as good a mugshot, I say. If I'm going to rank Justin Timberlake and Robert Downey Jr., I think this one is slightly lower. However, Justin Bieber barely looks like a mugshot at all. He's beaming at the camera. Are you allowed to smile in a mugshot?
Yes, so this was when he was 18 after being arrested under suspicion of driving under the influence. Lots of DUIs going on when it comes to celebrities. Then, of course, we have Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton coming up, I believe we do. Ah, there she is.
Well, she's doing a side profile there. Is that allowed? I thought when you do a passport photograph, you have to look straight on at the camera. Now, I have never been myself to Clark County Detention Centre in the United States, but I would wager that most people have to look directly at the camera. Is Paris Hilton getting special treatment here?
Ah, she's just posing, isn't she? That's what she does.
Well, Hugh Grant has also been famously arrested. Oh, that is... he's really not happy there. That's an interesting body contortion, really, in front of the LAPD, the Los Angeles
What was he in for? Another DUI?
No. This was much more famous. This was with a lady of the night.
Ah, right, OK. And Lindsay Lohan. Now, she's had a lot of mugshots. She's been in and out with these mugshots, very much so.
Well, she doesn't look
that bad. I can't remember how many
one.
Exactly she's had, but it's a very large number.
At least 6.
Multiple unwanted jail photo shoots, including a DUI arrest in 2007, stealing a necklace, apparently, and also assaulting a woman in a nightclub. Yes.
No, she's had a tough time with
possession of drugs and all sorts.
But I mean, she doesn't look that bad in the mugshot. I think of celebrities, I think generally they get a bit of leeway when it comes to their mugshots. But perhaps.
But you don't have to take your makeup off, do you? You can leave it on.
True. Maybe the most iconic of them all, however, was not a celebrity in the traditional sense, but someone who's actually perhaps more known for politics now than he ever was for celebrity.
Who could he be talking about?
Donald Trump had his mugshot put on T-shirts.
Yeah.
He's fundraising with his mugshot, which I think is perhaps the most innovative form of that particular version of photography.
But yeah, just before we clock off for the day, we wanted to bring you some reaction to Just Stop Oil's antics, potentially criminal antics, at Stonehenge. I think we've got the tweet from the Labour leader, which may be of interest to you. Have we got it? There we go.
Keir Starmer says the damage done to Stonehenge is outrageous. Just Stop Oil are pathetic. Those responsible must face the full force of the law.
Pathetic. Well, there you go. Strong stuff from Keir Starmer. And I think we also have the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. What's he had to say? Just a simple one. What is that? 6 words. Just Stop Oil are a disgrace.
Although they got that out half an hour before Keir Starmer did. Maybe Keir Starmer needed the extra half hour to write the extra 2 sentences.
Consult the focus group. I don't know. Well, anyway.
Well, it does seem it's nice in these times of political division to have a group like Just Stop Oil be able to bring the leader of the Tory party and the leader of the Labour Party together.
It's just a sense of entitlement that winds me up. I think my cause is important enough to, ruin your heritage site and make it close for the rest of the day. I mean.
Well, let's hope
it should never be rewarded, should it?
Should not. Let's hope they lock them up and throw away the key. But that's it from us today. Join us, of course, at the same time tomorrow, 12 o'clock, Monday to Friday. Up next, it's Martin Daubney, and he will have a reporter live at Stonehenge. Don't miss it.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. High pressure today. That means most places are going to be fine. There'll be some warm sunny spells as well. Not entirely blue skies. There are a couple of things going on. First of all, some patchy cloud lingering across the UK under this ridge of high pressure as it builds in. And secondly, a weak frontal system will bring thickening cloud and some spots of rain into the far north of Scotland through the day. Freshening breeze here, but otherwise plenty of sunshine, and the early cloud tends to disappear through the afternoon. So we're going to see some sunshine breaking out, where we get the sunshine feeling pleasant enough. 22 to 23 Celsius in the south, 21 Celsius further north. Although for northern and northwest Scotland, we do see further thickening of the cloud, especially for Lewis and Harris, with some outbreaks of rain moving in by the evening. But for much of the rest of Scotland, sunny skies remain as we end the day, and increasingly sunny skies for Northern Ireland, Northern England as well as for Wales, the Midlands. Plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures at 6 p.m. still at 20 or 22 Celsius. Now, by the later half of the evening, the cloud and the outbreaks of rain, along with a freshening breeze, push into western Scotland, eventually sinking into the central belt but tending to fizzle out. Meanwhile, across the rest of the UK, it's staying dry overnight with clear spells, but temperatures will dip in sheltered rural spots down to 4 or 5 Celsius across parts of England and Wales. So a fresh start to Thursday, but a bright start nevertheless. Plenty of sunshine first thing for England and Wales. There's always the threat of some showers making an appearance later across the far southeast, but for the vast majority it's going to stay dry. Long spells of sunshine, just some patchy cloud around, and highs of 23 or even 24 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nana Queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.